this thing was going to go. My gut instinct is that I will be the nominee and in a position to win this in a landslide versus Biden. And they will not let Biden run against me. So I believe that if I am the nominee, they will not let Biden run. It is why they're holding in the back pocket the documents case against Biden. It is why they're holding in the back pocket everything else that you're wondering why they're not charging or bringing now. It's not a Democrat or Republican thing. It's a managerial class, deep state bureaucratic class versus elected official puppets thing. This thing was going to go. My gut instinct is that I will be the nominee and in a position to win this in a landslide versus Biden.
You can't criticize his optimism. I would not be quite. My mic is not plugged in. Son of a gun! No matter how much I do here, where is the mic cable? It's right there. Listening to. Come on. Okay, hold on. It's not yet. Come on. Here we go. Now you can listen to Viva. What's it called? ASMR. All right, let's start that again. You can't blame Vivek or you can't criticize him for not being optimistic. But I would not place a bet on Vivek as being the nominee unless I were trying to win like the 1,000-to-1 long shot. But even then, I think I would no. Although I like him, and that's not to say I don't like him. But let's play this out because I think Vivek is right, but for the wrong reasons.
And they will not let Biden run against me.
I need to hear this. What would they let Biden run against DeSantis? Would they let Biden run against Trump? Would they let Biden run against Tabarnouche? I can't think of the other people in the. Oh, Mike Pence, whose political career and business career should be done, given that recent outrageous statement that he made to Tucker Carlson. Something about Vivek that they wouldn't let Joe Biden run against him in particular, but the rest of the GOP field? I don't think so. I just happen to think they're not going to let Joe Biden run, period.
So I believe that if I am the nominee, they will not let Biden run. It is why they're holding in the back pocket the documents case against Biden.
I think he has a good point here. I think we've talked about this a little while ago. Maybe Vivek is watching the channel, the Sunday night streams. They go after Trump for the wrongful handling of classified documents, so they can then turn around and use it against Joe Biden when he's no longer quite the useful idiot that he's been for the last couple of years. It's not far-fetched. Who would be a more useful idiot to replace him? Gavin Newsom. He's slightly more liked than Kamala Harris, but at this point, I think they would take anybody who's going to be a plausible, useful idiot that the deep state, the administrative state, can use for their bidding. But I don't think Vivek is wrong here.
It is why they're holding in the back pocket everything else that you're wondering why they're not charging or bringing now. It's not a Democrat or Republican thing. It's a managerial class, deep state bureaucratic class versus elected official puppets thing. This thing was going to go.
Tend to agree with them. Good evening, everybody. Let me make sure that everything is good before we go on. I had to move studios yet again. What I'm going to do is make sure that we're live on Rumble. It looks like we are, in fact, live on Rumble. Very good. We're live on Rumble. Are we live on vivabarneslaw.locals.com? We look like we're live on Viva Barnes. We're live on vivabarneslaw.locals.com. Okay, look, I've got the sponsors coming up, but let me just make sure that I actually checked the box for this stream contains a paid sponsorship. I did. Good. I've set everything up. Before I get into the sponsors, though, I actually want to talk about some dirty stuff. You all know that I cannot help myself. I follow Mehdi Hasan on Twitter. Mehdi Hasan, to quote a Jerry Seinfeld episode, he's a very, very bad man. Jerry, he's a very, very bad man in the political. I don't know personally. Maybe I'm sure he's a great father, great dog owner if he has a dog. Politically speaking, he is what we call a dangerous player. Dishonest, like it's nobody's business. Tactical, like it's nobody's business. Intelligent, like it's nobody's business. People don't like it. Mehdi Hasan is not dumb. He's smart, but intelligence without a moral compass is like a donkey with a tomahawk. No, it couldn't use a tomahawk. Intelligence without a moral compass is a liability. It's not an asset. and intelligence with a twisted moral compass or a partisan political compass, that's just outright dangerous. So pull this up, by the way, because it's an amazing thing. Like I just had Glenn Lowry on last week, and one of my observations, and this was not an observation on affirmative action. This was sort of a community observation. Like the Jewish community loves statistical overrepresentation when, we get to say, look how many artists, scientists, Nobel Peace Prize winners there are out there. Surely it shows something wonderful about the history and the culture of Jews, the love of the book, yada, yada, yada. Every group loves statistical overrepresentation when it's a good thing. And then all of a sudden, when it's not a good thing, then we say, well, you can't determine anything from that statistical overrepresentation. And if you come to any conclusions that are based on statistical overrepresentation in fields that you don't necessarily want to have statistical overrepresentation in, well, then you're called the isms, the ites, the ists, and whatever. So all that to say, within the community, we know you grow up, your parents tell you who all the famous actors are. They're Jewish. Oh, you never knew Harrison Ford's half Jewish. Go listen to Adam Sandler's Hanukkah song. You'll find out a lot of actors who are Jewish. O.J. Simpson, not a Jew. But guess who is? Hall of Famer Rod Carew. I don't even know who Rod Carew is. I just know the lyrics to that song. So check this out. I'm just fishing through my Twitter feed before the show, and I read a tweet from Mehdi Hasan that says, so weird that the Jewish public health expert and world-renowned vaccine doctor Peter Hotez didn't want to debate with the, quote, are Jews immune from COVID dude. Intelligent in that this is a cunning misrepresentation or repetition of what is overt MSM slanderous hit piece disinformation. RFK Jr. did not say that the COVID virus was intended to target certain races and not other races. What he did observe, and from what I understand, there is some scientific legitimacy to it, is that, much with like certain diseases that can affect certain genetics more than others. Tay-Sachs, sickle cell anemia happen to hit certain demographics more than others. His observation was not that COVID was a bioweapon designed to target certain races and leave others alone, but that it might have happened that some races are more susceptible and others less susceptible for whatever the reason. But the media headline, because they got to find a way, they got to go like a next angle to defame and demean and degrade and slander RFK Jr. RFK Jr. says it was a genetically designed bioweapon that was going after certain races, but not other races. Somebody said hogwash, horse crap. Mehdi Hasan knows it, but he knows that his audience is not going to necessarily, delve into what RFK Jr. actually said, even though RFK Jr. Spent more time than he should have addressing these accusations on Twitter this weekend. Okay, set that aside. So weird that the Jewish doctor, it's nice. Hey, like I always say, who never, I said it with Glenn Lowry, tongue in cheek. Who never lets you forget that you're Jewish? Members of the Jewish community and anti-Semites. And the reason is oddly the same. It's because that aspect of the identity is the determinate, highly relevant, defining element of a human. When you're in the Jewish community, for good and for bad, you're like, oh, he's Jewish. Okay, well, whatever. Oh, good to know. Oh, are you Jewish? Oh, we have a kinship. We have something to talk about. Other groups, oh, you're Jewish. Well, I'm reducing you to that aspect of your identity. It's a little, takes a little more dancing to get to sometimes because, black where people can't see it on your face. Sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. So it's a bit more of a dance. But the people who continually bring it up and who never let you forget it. Oh, you're eating a ham sandwich on Yom Kippur. You shouldn't be doing that. Shame on you. Members of the community and people who only see you as a member of the community. So weird that Jewish doctor. Hey, what's so weird, by the way? For someone who pays attention to this stuff, I didn't know that Peter Hotez was Jewish. I have to look it up now because now I'm thinking maybe he's not even Jewish. But Mehdi looks at Peter Hotez. I didn't know it. I didn't know Peter Hotez was Jewish. I know that this will certainly now foment some conspiracy theories. This will certainly now play into some bad stereotypes, some statistical overrepresentation, and some theories that some people have. And now Mehdi Hasan knows damn well it's going to play right into it. Oh, there's going to be people who didn't know that Peter Hotez was Jewish. Jewish public health expert and world. There's going to be some people out there, and I suspect a lot of them, who never knew this. There's going to be some genuine bad faith actors who are going to say Peter Hotez, this plays into a lot of historical stereotypes. He did this. He's pushing this jab, yada, yada, yada. There's going to be other people, just the outright trolls on the internet, who are going to now take this piece of information and use it to troll Peter Hotez. And there will be the malicious political partisan tools out there, the foot soldiers, who are deliberately going to send anti-Semitic vitriolic messages to Peter Hotez, even though they are on probably the same ideological alignment as Mehdi Hasan. They're going to do it so that Peter Hotez says, look at all these nasty anti-Jewish comments I'm getting in my DMs right now. The right is anti-Semitic. The anti-vaxxers are anti-Semitic. And Mehdi Hasan knows damn well that he just sparked that by doing what he did with this tweet. He knows it. Okay. He knows that he did it. I've got to see this. I did not know that Peter Hotez, Jewish. I had no idea. Peter Hotez, well, let's just go here. I guess it's going to be Jew. Hotez was born in Hartford, Connecticut to a Jewish family. I read his Wikipedia page and I didn't know that. That's interesting. Mehdi Hasan knows exactly what he just did here. And he did it on purpose. He did it maliciously. That is a dog whistle. That is to get everybody out there, every troll on the internet, to send Peter Hotez dirty, mean, nasty DMs so that Mehdi Hasan's next tweet is going to be, look at all those anti-Semitic, anti-vaxxer, far-right, alt-right, whatevers. Okay, now Barnes is in the back, but I haven't done the sponsors yet. You may have noticed, everybody, it said this video contains a paid sponsorship, because it does. We're going to do 2 tonight. I found this to be much more effective, and I like it. It flows better. We're going to start with the looking good, and then we're going to go into the feeling good. Although looking good and feeling good, as Geraldo, what was his name? Fernando's Hideaway. It's better to look good than to feel good, darling. Well, if you can look good and feel good, that's the best. Hold on one second. Let me just see here. Does everybody? How do I look? I don't know. Maybe I look tired and cranky. I am not one who really cares about what one looks like physically, except I did brush my hair and oil it up so it's nice and smooth and hydrated. Some people care about what their skin looks like. Some people want to look younger. They want to have tighter, firmer skin. They want to, get rid of the grimace wrinkles. Genucel.com. I spent time on the phone with this company, one of the members of the company, to talk about this and make sure I understood the product properly. They've got a number of skin products which are scientifically based, as far as I understand. Dr. Drew has talked about it. Retinol firms up the skin. This is the story. It's an American, success story. An Egyptian pharmacist comes to America, starts up his pharmacy, has his own proprietary blends of skin creams, puts them together, sells them or gives them to his customers, and they come back after the weekend and say, we need this stuff. It's so damn good. Make more of it. And thus a business was born. Made in America, out of New Jersey, I believe. They employ something like 50 people. The product is amazing. The people love it. What I was going to say, sponsor the New Jersey Devils. And if I look younger, people, I guess it will actually work for your observation as well. Genucel.com, promo code Viva will get you 70% off the most popular package. It's good stuff. Shame to admit, I've been using it, but only as a scientific experiment. So if you see differences, that is why. Second sponsor of the evening, people, going from looking good to feeling good. Brickhouse Nutrition, fieldofgreens.com. This is another one because I use this stuff and I don't, I rarely will say, promote something that I don't actually use myself, only so that I could feel good and feel secure about it. But in addition to using stuff myself, I also like to make sure that it's something legit and something that's actually good and that there's actually some science behind. So I spent a good half an hour on the phone with the doctor from Field of Greens asking about this product. How does it work? How do they make it? Where are their ingredients from? Made in America, USDA organic, because it's a food. It's not a supplement and it's not an extract. It's powdered greens. Most people don't know you're supposed to have 5 to 7 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. Most people do not have that. 1 spoonful of this. It tastes good. It looks like swamp water because swamp water is the nutrient of life. One spoonful twice a day is 2 servings of fruits and vegetables. You get your antioxidants, you get all your good stuff in it. It's a healthy habit to get away from the power drinks, to get away from those disgusting chemical sodas. And for those who can't get their fruits and vegetables, it's the alternative, the healthy alternative made in America as well. USDA organic, because it's a food. It's not an extract. It's not a supplement. It's delicious. It's a healthy habit. And if you can't get your fruits and veggies, this is an alternative. If you're on vacation and all that you get is fast food crap, even there when you get your vegetables, it's like iceberg lettuce, which has no nutritional value, plus the salad dressing, which is crap. This is the healthy alternative. Packs easy, packs light, mixes up great. It's delicious. Genucel.com, promo code VIVA for 70% off their most popular package. Fieldofgreens.com brings you to Brickhouse Nutrition, 15% off your first order with the promo code VIVA. Now, links are in the description as well. Thank the sponsors and thank Robert Barnes for being so patient behind there. So you forage? We should don't forage. I knew someone who wrote the book on mushrooms, like wild mushroom eating. It was my mother-in-law's good friend, and the person actually passed away from making a mistake that you can only make once, I guess. All right, Robert, I'm bringing you in here. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, sir. How goes the battle?
Good.
All right, now everyone, let us know if the audio is good. Robert, am I getting too conspiratorial, or does Mehdi Hasan know damn well exactly what he was doing by pointing the big finger at, now everyone knows, Jewish doctor Peter Hotez? Whatever ill anyone thought of Peter Hotez because of what he did and said, well, they now have an identity aspect of politics, an aspect of identity politics to hang their hat on. Does he know what he's doing, or is he just a useful idiot?
Well, I guess if he attacks you, that must mean he's an anti-Semite.
That we'll see. We'll see if that happens. He's been ignoring me. It's the best tactic that I think he can employ. Robert, what do you have over your shoulder?
That is Lincoln at Gettysburg. It is the book of the month that we are reviewing over at vivabarneslaw.locals.com. And a great book about how the America was reinterpreted, reunderstood, and partially recreated in the through the filter and frame of Thomas Paine's Common Sense and the Declaration of Independence by Lincoln's speech at Gettysburg.
Oh, I forgot one other thing, by the way. No medical advice, no legal advice, no election fortification advice. These things right here, by the way, super chats. YouTube takes 30% of all of them. So if you don't want to support YouTube, but you want to support us, you can go over to Rumble. The link is up there in the pinned comment. Rumble takes 20% of those, but they're not doing it for the rest of the year. And best place, Robert, where's the best place to follow us?
Yeah, well, there's a live chat ongoing at vivabarneslaw.locals.com. In the part of the show that is the locals exclusive part of the show, we'll be covering 4 bonus topics, plus answering any question that has any $5 tip or more in the live chat we will get to.
All right. And now, Robert, we didn't have the Ray Epps lawsuit on our menu, but do we add that maybe for the after party at Locals, or do we have it up there?
Oh, we do. So here's our top 12 topics tonight. The Fifth Circuit stay on the government censorship case. Whether Vivek is a natural-born citizen for the purposes of qualifying for the presidency or the vice presidency, and how it also may relate to both his and Trump's proposals to take away birth citizenship, what sometimes is called the anchor baby debate. Ripple has a big win against the SEC. The impact may ripple out throughout the crypto industry. A major crypto arguable fraudster was indicted, the Celsius former CEO. We have the big Trump trial where Trump's team is moving for a continuance of the case until after Election Day. Our 6th topic, which was the favorite topic on the board in the board poll, was for the rare January 6th acquittal out of the District of Columbia. And some other January 6th cases people had asked about: the Supreme Court petition by Pattis, on the obstruction issue we've previously discussed, the Owen Schroyer plea deal, and another bad bail judgment by a January 6th judge. Then we have the Epps defamation case and whether he will now be prosecuted like he claims in his complaint as part of the January 6th cases. New York's redistricting, what does that mean? The New York's real Supreme Court is its court of appeals. Its Supreme Court is its trial court. And it has ordered the commission back to redistrict. What does that mean potentially for Republicans and Democrats in Congress? Kari Lake takes her case up to the Arizona Supreme Court, or asks that they take it. And Abe Hamada finally gets an order on the last possible day from a trial court judge. Did he dodge justice once again? Well, I'm sure everyone would be shocked by the answer. Ohio 1 is a proposal a lot of people had been asked us to discuss because it's up for a vote in August. We'll discuss that. The 11th case we'll be discussing is the justice system in Mississippi is, I think, justifiably under legal attack by the NAACP. Both Steve Bannon and Elon Musk have major fee disputes that are ongoing in multiple courts. And our 4 bonus topics that will likely be reserved for the locals only exclusive portion of the show will concern the Microsoft monopoly case concerning Call of Duty, Walmart and Bank of America both getting caught overcharging and overbilling. The Texas TikTok ban faces a First Amendment challenge. And a little analysis on the legal take on the scenes from the movie that we watched this week at Viva Barnes Law.locals.com. Dirty Harry. Was that a correct constitutional analysis in the middle of the movie?
Fantastic. Now, Robert, I need you to refresh my memory. The first one of the day is the Fifth Circuit stay of censorship.
Yep.
I'm absolutely blanking out as to what that subject is.
Oh, so that's the Missouri versus Biden the Louisiana case where the judge issued an injunction to prevent the Biden administration's ongoing censorship efforts. The government appealed on an emergency basis to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals expedited the process for briefing and oral argument and issued what they call an administrative stay. That's a stay that doesn't resolve anything on the merits, pending its oral argument.
Okay, so now there's a stay of the stay. There's a stay of the injunction.
Right. So the Biden administration can go back to censoring for the time being.
And they can go back to discussing with the intent of trying to get them to take down posts on social media. Administrative stay, is there I have no idea how that works. Is there a time frame, or is that administrative stay until the hearing on the appeal of the injunction to prevent the interference?
It's an administrative stay pending their resolution of the case. But they have ordered an expedited resolution of the case.
Yeah, the expedited. That we'll talk about expedited resolutions of cases when we get to Trump. Vivek. So Vivek?
Right before we get to Vivek,
yeah.
Some people had asked, like Tim Pool was asking, how could this happen? Whenever the deep state, which has deep ties to this case, ask any federal court for emergency relief, they almost always grant it. When the deep state asks, the courts come bowing. That's the short answer on why they granted the administrative stay. Again, they didn't address the merits. But when when it's the FBI, when it's the Department of Justice, when it's the Central Intelligence Agency, when it's the CISA, when it's these kind of agencies, federal courts just do whatever they ask 9 times out of 10.
Now I say the judge is going to be pissed because his order is obviously being overridden, not on the merits though. Does the precedent or does the factual, not timeline rather, but does the factual elements of the judge's order still have the same value that it had prior to this stay of the injunction?
Kind of. And I mean, everything's kind of pending the appeal. But the only thing they stayed was the injunctive relief. They didn't overturn anything on the merits or anything else at this stage.
Okay. All right. Interesting. And we'll do the Vivek before we head over to Rumble exclusively. So the discussion with Vivek, he's a natural born American. He constitutionally has no potential impediment to becoming president, much like Kamala Harris did not either, despite the fact that she's first generation born to immigrant parents, brought up in Canada, actually just up the street from where I used to live, went to Westbound High School. Vivek has the same type of issue, same type of questions going on for him right now.
Yes. So there's people out there that still believe that the phrase natural born citizen in Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5 of the United States Constitution is the precondition to be elected president, along with the fact that you have to be a 14-year resident in the United States and you have to be at least 35 years of age, which at the time of the Constitution, that was relatively old. These days, it'd be the equivalent of 45 today, maybe even 50, you could say. But there are people who believe natural born citizen requires your parents also be natural born citizens. And so the debate is, what does natural born citizens mean? It has correlation to the 14th Amendment provision about if you're born in the United States, you're a citizen of the United, and subject to its jurisdiction, you're a citizen of the United States. Both Vivek and Biden have proposed, not Biden, Vivek and Trump have both proposed banning citizenship for those born in the United States unless their parents were also citizens of the United States. And so the question is, are their proposals constitutional? And under Vivek's proposal, in essence, he himself wouldn't have been qualified to run for the president if his changes became law. So in the future. So it goes back. So it's mostly anchored in the so-called anchor baby debate, but it's come up in the case of McCain. It's came up prominently in the case of Obama. It's come up. There's been efforts to change it legislatively over the years. One time to try to make Schwarzenegger qualified, another time to make someone, Orrin Hatch try to push that through. So the question is, what does natural born citizen mean in the Constitution?
But is there not a logical sort of a, what's the word? The philosopher Zenonian paradox here. If it couldn't be, if you're not natural born because you were born here but your parents weren't, would that not still be the same problem for the next generation if that rule were to apply? Well, if the father or the parent who was born in America but their parents weren't is not eligible for to be president, would their kids then be eligible?
The full ramifications of it are unclear. The issue really becomes, my view is it's a lot of this argument has erupted in the context of immigration primarily. Secondarily, in the context of Obama, and then even McCain was challenged in 2008 on these grounds. Others have been challenged over the years. There are people who have brought suit challenging whether that provision is itself overridden by the 14th Amendment. And in my view, the 14th Amendment and this clause are the same. I don't think they're really different. Even though the words natural born don't exist in the 14th Amendment, I think that's what born and subject to the U.S. jurisdiction means, is the same as natural born. And it's a place where I disagree with. I don't think Trump's proposal is constitutional at all. I don't think Vivek's proposal is constitutional at all. A natural born citizen, and it's a misunderstanding of the history of the term. It's a desire to restrict what people consider illegal immigration. There's an incentive to illegally immigrate here if you can have your child here, because then you can use that as, quote, an anchor to bring in family members and make them citizens as well, or get protected immigration status as well. So I get the political concern, but it misses why this constitutional provision exists. It also misses the common sense interpretation of the word. It also misses the history of where this originates, policy and principle wise.
Can you, not to get too deep into it, but explain that? Someone in Rumble on the chat said native born is not natural born. And now I don't know if that's a distinction without a difference.
Yeah, I think that person's wrong. So there have been legal scholars, and it goes all the way back to Samuel Johnson in the UK. The term itself was commonly used in the United Kingdom going back to the early 1600s. And what it really represents is the idea of citizenship derived from the power of the king. If you were someone that was subject to the power of the king, then you were therefore a citizen of the realm. Now, often that came with duties and obligations as much as it came with rights and privileges and immunities. In our case, it comes with a lot more rights, privileges, and immunities than duties and obligations than it did in the United Kingdom at the time in the 16th and 1700s. But the principle is, as Samuel Johnson noted, as future legal scholars noted, as people at the time of the founding noted, natural born really meant native born. That you were native to the land, that you were native to the community, that you were native to being under the jurisdiction of the king. And this provision exists primarily and principally to preclude royal aristocrats from stealing the presidency. That's why it exists. The 14th Amendment exists to make sure to overturn Dred Scott and make clear that everybody born, white or black, slave or not slave, was a citizen of the United States, regardless of their ancestry. And that's what Lincoln at Gettysburg is partially about. All men are created equal is the meaning of the American experiment. And that the people being defined therein is anybody born. And the king, like the U.S. government, like sovereigns today, had power, two kinds of power. One was based on who you were as an individual, in personam, personal jurisdiction over the body, over the corpus, over the individual. Habeas corpus is thus my body is illegally restrained or detained or imprisoned. but also territorial jurisdiction, that I have power because of the land where something happened or occurred. And the theory has always been that if you control the land, anybody born on that land is subject to your jurisdiction, subject to your control. So native born, natural born, to me, are identical to the 14th Amendment provision of being born and subject to U.S. jurisdiction. Who they wanted to carve out, aside from royal aristocrats coming in and stealing it, were people that were diplomats that were here because they were not subject to U.S. jurisdiction, but they were here as diplomats, or maybe an occupying foreign army. That those people would not be considered part of the polity, part of the community. It was not intended to exclude anybody born of immigrants. There's simply no constitutional history for that interpretation, despite anti-immigration voices pretending they are. The Supreme Court has addressed this directly, indirectly, never directly, a half dozen times. And in every single instance, going all the way back to 1844, they agreed that a natural born person is someone who's physically born within the territory of the United States, period. And that regardless of who their parents are, that is illegally inconsequential to the analysis. So that's why Kamala Harris qualifies to be vice president constitutionally. That's why Vivek qualified. People don't always remember this applies to the vice president through the 12th Amendment, which added this clause's provisions to the vice president through that amendment. But that, I mean, for example, I saw there's like Post-Millennial, some of these other publications were posting stories that said everybody knows that both of your parents have to be citizens. That's directly refuted. And by the way, if both of your parents had to be natural born parents, Donald Trump wouldn't qualify for the presidency. So, these people that are advancing these ideas that somehow we should limit citizenship to ancestry, what they're mostly confusing is that they've always wanted to extend citizenship to people who are born of American parents, even if they're born outside of the United States. And that was to protect their citizenship inheritance rights through their American parents. And they didn't want them to lose their citizenship just because the coincidence in those cases of them being born in a foreign territory. And thus it extended to John McCain, who was born in Panama. Thus, even if, in my view, even if Barack Obama had been born in Africa, that was part of the dispute. To me, it was a statutorily coincidence that at the time the Congress didn't recognize that as natural born citizenship. But I don't think Congress has the right to interpret it however it wants. I think that that because his mother was an American, he was an American. And but they take that and they try to make that the limit of citizenship. And that's a different strain. You can either be subject to the king because of who you are as a person, or you can be subject to the king because of where you are as a person. And who you're born to or where you're born to are two alternative paths, not only one path to citizenship. And that's what it means. That's what it was intended to mean. That's what almost every scholar, senator, congressman, representative, founder, Supreme Court decision, jurist, legal decision has said about it. And so this attempt to eviscerate this because it might be politically convenient is a bad idea. As I always say, you got to accept the entire. If you don't like the Constitution, amend it. That's your solution. It's not to amend it by legislative fiat, by executive fiat, or by judicial fiat, or by political convenience.
Okay, it's very interesting. I had only looked at it from the perceived loyalty aspect, like someone who's first generation, whose parents are immigrants and who was born here as an anchor baby might have conflicted loyalties, and people would be concerned in terms of representation. The historical aspect that you just explained adds another dimension to it. And I was just making sure when it came to Vivek, parents were immigrants, born and raised in Ohio, I think. And as far as I had no idea, he's 37. I didn't realize he's that young. Loyalty to nation, I don't think people would have the same concern with Vivek that they have with Kamala, who first generation born to immigrant parents, but raised in Canada. And so
there, that's like, we allow dual citizenships. That really wasn't their concern. Their concern wasn't the possibility of being subject to another foreign government. Their concern was royal aristocrats stealing the presidency. So it was not that somebody might have another obligation. And I've never supported that because there's people who want to interpret natural born citizenship to be exclusive, to mean that you can only be subject to the jurisdiction of the United States under the 14th Amendment. Well, that's not what it says. They could have chosen that. They chose not to. And this debate was had at the time in Congress, by the way, about what did it mean to be subject to a foreign government. And they chose to just make it subject to, not only subject to, because otherwise, for example, what would happen if a foreign government, this happens in Israel in some cases, other cases, makes someone a citizen, right, or declare someone a citizen for some reason, like
I would say that they can't serve in government. Robert, I'm going to need you to convince me why.
But what if they do that? Well, to me, that doesn't matter at all. That should never matter constitutionally, because otherwise you subject a person's citizenship rights to the whim of a foreign government, because the foreign government can declare it without your willingness.
Oh, you could renounce it. You could renounce it then, but
sometimes you can renounce it, sometimes you can't. I mean, take for example, most people who have U.S. citizenship didn't realize they had U.S. citizenship because they were born overseas, grew up overseas, etc. But a parent was a U.S. parent, and then the U.S. decided to impose FATCA on their foreign bank accounts. They're subject to it. They can't retroactively repatriate or renounce. The U.S. often objects to the ability to even do so, to expatriate or renounce. So whether you have a right to renounce is still an ongoing issue, because they still say it's a matter of legislative grace whether you have a right to renounce your citizenship. They can condition it upon forfeiture of your property. So I'm not in favor of giving any state that kind of power. Plus, it's just not what the founders meant at the time. There's absolutely no evidence that they intended to, and it makes sense if you understood the history and the origin of the term. The origin of the term was, if you're subject to our power, then you have the privileges of our power. So if is someone born in the United States subject to the jurisdiction of the United States? Yes. The only people who would be a foreign occupying army, the son of a diplomat here on immunity, born. Those are the rare exceptions, but nobody else would apply. And again, this was intended. It's like the emoluments clause being misapplied these days. This was intended a very particular concern: foreign aristocrats, dukes, kings usurping the American presidency. If it doesn't address that, it doesn't really reach anything else. And then the limited issue of Americans born overseas who might be on military or diplomatic duty or for other reasons, and ambassadors' kids born here. Those are the only people they meant really subject to the exclusion, and nobody else. And once you start giving presidents and politicians and jurists the means to start excluding people from citizenship, you end up with decisions like Dred Scott.
That's an interesting perspective about it. I'm still concerned by the dual loyalties of those who are sitting in government, and I needle some of our Canadian politicians who are not Ukrainian and have the Ukrainian flag in their bios along with the Canadian flag, and I do question whose interests they represent. It's an interesting perspective that you can't renounce it for tax reasons. That seems to be indicative of another problem, not necessarily the one that I think is the problem in terms of representing your citizens, but. All right, fascinating. And hold on, there was one more thing about Vivek. I forget, Robert. Is your opinion on his odds changing in accordance with the market?
No.
Okay. All right. Now, before we go over to Rumble exclusively, let me just bring up a few of these super chats. Robert's opinion on citizenship runs contrary to the understanding of every other nation in the world.
Wrong. Read the history, read the legal history, read the Supreme Court's history, read the scholars' history. Don't read your selective history. I get a whole bunch of anti-immigrant. And then once again, they're unleashing something dumb and dangerous because they're short-term minded. That if you believe that you don't want anchor baby problems and that's such a disaster, amend the Constitution. That's your remedy, not by judicial fiat, not by legislative fiat, not by executive fiat. And ask yourself whether you really want to start giving the state that power. Do you think when the state gets to decide we can strip you of your citizenship just by redefining what something means at a whim? You like that idea? You really think that's a good idea? People have not thought this through. They get short-term minded, they get short-term focused, and they make dumb decisions when they do that.
Note, and I don't know this to be true, Robert, you'll know better than me. SCOTUS rule is that children born to lawful U.S. residents...
Completely wrong. The Supreme Court explicitly rejected exactly what he said. Learn to read Supreme Court decisions before you make dumb questions.
Thank you for the super chat. However, now the Chief's Way says, here's my conspiracy theory. Department of Justice fakes charges on Epps to give Epps a reason for a lawsuit for a fake trial to clear his name and save their arse. Not bad. And then we got the mark of the my little beast is not a birthmark. Well, I've got both dogs down here now. One sleeping on my backpack and the other one already took a dump. I cleaned it up before the stream. That's why I was a little late. Okay, how do I get this out of here like this? Everybody, head on over to Rumble now. We're going to continue the party exclusively on Rumble because they are the platform that supports free speech, and I'm exclusive with them. So, Viva Barnes, Viva Fry on Rumble. The link is there. 2466 people should be migrating to the great Rumble, and then we're going to go to locals afterwards. So I'm ending on YouTube right now. Go to Rumble. All right, Robert, what was next on our menu here? Hold
Ripple.
on. Ripple. Oh, there's I know you're happy about this. Happy, whether or not you made predictions that you could, had it gone one way or the other, you could have said I was right, but you were right, Robert. Now, the argument at the time was that these are not securities in the standard sense of the word, as per the Howey test, which I'm going to ask you to explain for us. But the bottom line, the SEC went after Ripple, claiming that their tokens, that their crypto was a security. Not you'll have to flesh out the difference between a currency and a security, but a security subject to the Security and Exchange Commission regulation. The judge came down. I suspect this decision is going to go right to appeal. Tell me if I'm wrong. But bottom line, they said Ripple can issue securities as securities, but that their crypto or their tokens, whatever we want to call them, do not pass the second aspect of the Howey test and are not securities and shall not be deemed to be securities. Ripple, obviously, once upon a time I had Ripple. I sold it when it was delisted because I never made a penny off crypto. Ripple obviously had a great day on Friday. The decision sounds sound, Robert, but I mean, I'll need you to flesh out for everybody who might not know exactly what the Howey test is. What is the Howey test? Is this decision the sound, correct decision? I think I know that you think it is. Does it get appealed, and what is the long-term prospect for Ripple specifically? And does this have actual ripple effects for all other cryptocurrencies out there?
Oh, without question, because the federal judge said that a digital token is not in and of itself a security. And that's precisely what the Securities and Exchange Commission was using the Ripple case to try to establish. The goal, and that's what there's criminal cases pending we'll get to that actually rely upon the assumption that a digital token is a security. There's a bunch, all those lawsuits involving crypto, almost that are trying to go after Tom Brady and Shaquille O'Neal and Matt Damon and all the rest, and Kim Kardashian and Mayweather and you name it, all rely upon the assumption that a digital token is a security and holding them liable for promoting security without it being registered and without meeting other standards and tests. I have never believed, I think the SEC has always overreached. I think the Howey test is too broad. I mean, the SEC was meant to really govern stocks traded on Wall Street or traded on those kind of exchanges. It was never really intended to reach everyday, ordinary business activity. Investing in commodities and currencies and other things of that nature outside of the stock market itself or something equal there too. But the Supreme Court expanded it dramatically during the peak of the New Deal so they could regulate whatever the heck they wanted. And basically now they can regulate anything as long as it's an investment contract. But even under that broad definition of security, a digital token never fit that definition. Nobody is buying the token. Few people are buying it as part of a contract. Two, here there were some institutional people that did, and thus that was subject to the security laws in the Ripple case, but everything else they rejected. But the investment of money, common enterprise, expectation of profit derived from the effort of others. That's too broad.
Well, if to play devil's advocate, I could see the investment of money. People buy crypto with the expectation.
What does that even mean, investment of money? Does that mean expenditure of money? Does that mean transfer of money? Does that mean transfer of other things?
Oh, well, no. I'm not going to, without commenting on whether or not this should be the test, just as far as the test goes, an investment money. Yeah, I spend $100 on Ripple. I'm not doing it because I think it's going to be worthless. I do it because it's going to be worth something. Like I buy a gold coin in a common enterprise. And that's where I guess the main distinction is when you buy shares in a company, you want to have a say in the activities of the company. When you buy crypto, it's roulette. I mean, it's like sort of in a way, it's sort of like gambling at a casino, where nobody would consider that, I don't think, a security.
You're not buying shares, and then the other component is the promoter component, which is, I mean, what should have been defined as a security is something that was more akin to a stock, and they should have defined it that way. And instead, the court just expanded it to reach things that were uh, akin to stocks, and it ended up being anything that was an investment contract. And then what the definition of investment really ended up depending upon, because they were so vague about what common enterprise means, so vague about what it means to invest. It all came down to are you paying for somebody to promote it? And it's like, okay, now you've got every promotion plan out there, and that's way too big or broad of a definition. But even under that bit, and Ripple, to their credit here, tried to restrict the definition of Howard, use it to say, here's what the law was really intended to get to. Here's what's still consistent with Howard, but will restrict this from getting wayward. The court rejected Ripple's defense, but Ripple's defense will take that up through the appellate food chain and say, this is what the law should be, because this is getting way too lax, way too liberal, way too much regulatory power. But even under that, the court said digital token doesn't even meet that standard. And so, I mean, what Ripple does, it's a cryptographic blockchain ledger. And then they created XRPs, a digital token. And some of those digital tokens they gave to employees and gave to key executives. Some they were allowed to be sold on an exchange where nobody knew who the seller or buyer even was. There was anonymity in that process. And then some they sold institutionally pursuant to contracts. Only the last one did she say, could that constitute a security? The rest, she said, don't, she said, because there's no two main reasons why. And here, the anonymity function of Ripple was critical. The anonymity function, she's like, how can you call something an investment contract with an intention and expectation of promotion of the contract when the seller doesn't know who the buyer is and the buyer doesn't even know who the seller is? It's like, that's kind of nuts in the context of an exchange. So what she said is all the cryptos on exchanges are not securities. This guts all the civil lawsuits out there against all the so-called promoters. This guts the suits against Shaq, guts the suits against Tom Brady, it guts all of them. And so that was a massive, massive win against the SEC by Ripple, but for the entire crypto industry.
Robert, I'm just thinking out loud now. These markets where you have the futures on presidential candidates, those are not considered to be securities.
Well, I mean, there are aspects that the CFD, I think it was the Commodities and Futures Trading Commission. They were trying to regulate Predicted on some grounds that they had regulatory control, but the Fifth Circuit stayed it. People have wondered why Predicted's still up and active. That's why. The court was skeptical of and it hasn't been reached final adjudication, but they aren't allowing the government to enforce that, and nor should they. And I mean, I've had a problem with a lot of the gambling laws applying to a lot of what goes on in political betting or sports betting in general, because in reality, you're not, it's not random chance. It just isn't. It doesn't meet the definition of gambling. Gambling is something you have no control over the outcome of. And that sports betting, you absolutely have some control over the information that's either more likely or not less likely to occur. Same with political campaigns and the rest. So I think they've misapplied those laws in those contexts, but they've tried to apply securities in California is also one of the worst. Future purchases in vehicles way back. It's an older case. They try to call that a security. I mean, they try to call all kinds of things a security that just aren't. It was meant to, I'm going to give you money for stock in an enterprise, right? I mean, that's what it was meant for. And if you want to apply it outside the stock market, okay, I'm not a big fan of that, but fine. To the penny stocks and the unlisted stocks and all those, okay. But that's what it was for. It was not for every other contract concerning a commodity or concerning a currency. And it should never have been applied there. Now, this case doesn't reach those aspects because it doesn't have to, because it says all you got to look at is the anonymity and by itself, and you realize that it just the very nature of a digital exchange. And then she said, as to all the money given to executives and employees, That's an in-kind benefit. They didn't even make the investment. So there's not even an investment here. So the government was trying to pretend that your labor time was the equal to being an investment. That gives you an idea how badly they were trying to define investment. That now it meant anything in exchange for possible future compensation was now an investment. This was the problem with those two liberalized terms the Supreme Court used. But and they emphasize it doesn't matter if your motive is speculative, because going to your point, that was part of what the government was arguing. If your motive is to purchase this because you think it will go up in value, it's automatically a security. It's like, dear Lord, that covers a ridiculous number of things.
Baseball cards. I mean, that's
absolutely. Can you imagine everybody getting arrested for selling baseball cards because they're unregistered securities? I mean, that's how nuts what the government was doing. But it was essential to their war on crypto. Because, I mean, Ripple had been very effective at selling its XRP token on digital exchanges, but it's open source, which I like. So people can use it in a way it's more transparent than the problematic cryptos. It still has certain issues because people closer to it make the most money, and that can create an effect that's undesirable. But putting that aside, the open source component of it ended up saving it in many respects, because it created the anonymity for the digital exchange to operate, but also it allowed people to use the app for all kinds of payment processing purposes and become almost a de facto medium of exchange that facilitated the current exchange around the world. And basically, it's removing power from central banks and government. That's what crypto really does. It limits surveillance power. It limits control power. It limits the government's ability and central banks' ability, and really a cartel of private banks, if you talk about the Eurodollar, who's really running the financial system more than the central banks or governments even are. And it precludes them from having the power they want. And that's why there was this SEC war on them. And this was a massive, this was their big test case. Massive defeat. But also it has all kinds of repercussions and ramifications for all those plaintiffs' lawyers thinking they were going to get rich. So in the shacks of the world, because they advertised or marketed a digital token.
Well, I mean, they could still go after the shacks for, I don't know, fraudulent misrepresentation, which, I'm thinking of Dennis.
Almost all their theories are promotion theories, because they really don't have him knowing that the underlying, they don't even, I think, allege that he knew that what he was promoting wasn't good. They were saying, you're a promoter, you're an unregistered promoter, hence you're liable under the securities law.
That's interesting.
If it's not security, bye-bye lawsuit.
When it comes to Kevin O'Leary, I sort of took for granted he knew what it was. He was in on the pump and dump.
He's a different story.
Yeah. Okay, so that's fascinating. They're not undoing the Howey test. I mean, we brought it up, and we could see.
No, this judge did not. This judge did not accept. But Ripple is preserving that. So that's the government risk for fighting this up through the appellate food chain, is that the court goes even further than an appeals court, or the Supreme Court goes even further than district court does, and says, we're going to clarify what this means going forward, and uses what Ripple called the essential ingredients test, which is saying, let's get this back to being stocks. It's got to be, you have a contract for the purpose of increasing the value of what you're purchasing, with depending upon the promoter's explicit and express commitment to promote it. If you include those components in it, you make it a stock, which is what Securities and Exchange Commission is supposed to be about, not about anything traded that they want to regulate.
All right. Well, I guess now I see the interplay between this and the Celsius indictment, but I suspect the guy from Mashinsky from Celsius is in big trouble anyhow. So Celsius, Robert, I have just brain farts when it comes to crypto. I understand sort of what it is. They say decentralized digital ledgers, and it can't be falsified. And yet I know what crypto is in a sense, and I don't understand it. Celsius seems to be yet another one of these cryptocurrencies that issue a token. Apparently, they were offering like easy access loans based on their tokens, which they were hoping would increase in value. I don't know what Mashinsky did to pump up the value of the tokens, but it went the way of the dodo bird, of the Sam Bankman-Frieds, of the FTXs, and I guess their token tanks. The very asset that makes the value of the company disappears into nothing, because as far as I still understand, cryptocurrency is money made out of nothing. Now he's been indicted, fraud, but the SEC is going after him as well for violating securities and SEC law. If you're able to explain what Celsius did better than I can, And is the fraud merely a pump and dump fraud scheme, or is this somehow unique to crypto? And now what's going to happen to the SEC aspect of it, given the rippling effect?
This was one of the many bad faith actors, according to the allegations of the indictment, in the crypto space that used some of the benefits of crypto against its potential audience. And basically, they're saying because crypto has all of these values, you can now use it to do high leverage loans. You can store it now as an asset for us that will get you a higher rate of return. And because of how we're able to invest, that you'll get all the benefits of the big banks without the burdens of the big banks, without the access restrictions of the big banks. And so they parlayed how this is an alternative to the big banks to a susceptible audience that didn't understand the distinctions, and some of whom were just greedy. Some of the audience, if it's too good to be true, it's not true. I mean, some of the leverage promises and profitability promises they were making were deeply problematic.
Well, it sounded just as preposterous as FTX. Like it's just gonna keep going up. What I don't understand in all of this is they use the tokens to procure easy access loans.
Yep.
That loan has to be turned into fiat currency somewhere down the line. I don't understand how that interplay works. I don't understand how that works. Can you flesh it out for a dunce?
It gets complicated. The short answer is hey, give us your crypto, and if you give us your crypto, we'll convert it into investments. We'll convert it into lending power to you, potentially in U.S. currency, and we'll invest it on your behalf, and you'll be investing it. You can buy our token as a way in which to securitize it and collateralize it. And what they really did is they were taking the money, using it for speculative investments that weren't getting the rate of returns that they were lying about. They were secretly buying up at different key times part of their own token in order to inflate its value and create a run in the market. And then they were not securing the customers' deposits like they said they were, much like FTX. So it's very analogous to FTX in many respects. It was like a mini FTX. Now, the CEO apparently made $40 million in profits off of this. At one point, they had $25 billion under management. They ended up with less than $5 billion, had to go into bankruptcy. A lot of big names were tied to Celsius. Now, the CEO had been around for a brief period of time. His CFO was or COO was I think a UK corporate lawyer that came in on the scam, saw the opportunity, ran with it, according to the allegations of the indictment. Where the feds say that the earnings program that they were running, the rewards program, which was a disguised investment scheme, was a security. They may be right about that, but they also claim the token was a security. I don't think they win on that anymore. So I think that securities fraud part of the case goes away. But they also have just old school conspiracy to defraud, commodities fraud, wire fraud, etc. So I think that they have plenty of ground. Wire fraud is so broad. If you use anything that goes through the mail, and these days, internet automatically is across state lines, and you do anything to defraud someone of their money or property, basically you're nailed. So it's basically a fraud case these days. And it sounds like from the indictment, they have a long litany of false statements and misrepresentations known to be made by him, that weren't just speculative investment hopes or promises. So I think that he looks to be in serious trouble.
And now I'm just pulling up his Wikipedia. Early life, Mashinsky was born in 1965 in the Soviet Union to a Jewish family. His family obtained permission to leave the country in the 70s, later moved to Israel. From an early age, he was a tinkerer like his father, yada, yada, yada. I was looking for any political connection, Robert, like the FTX. What's his name? Sam Bankman-Fried. Do we know if there's any political Ukrainian, Russian, I don't know, aspect to this?
Not that I know of, no.
And now, do we know if is he like the Lord of War guy who pretended to be Jewish to get out of the Soviet Union to go to Israel, or is he, okay, fine. I'm trying to get my oldest to watch Lord of War because I think it's a great movie to watch, but made the mistake of starting Wolf of Wall Street. I've never seen it before, Robert. The first 2 scenes of that movie are wildly inappropriate.
That's not a kid's show. No, kids
Oh,
movie.
I was like, oh, it's a law. You know, it's about the law stuff.
It's a trip through depravity.
Anyhow,
That whole movie is, by the way. That whole movie is really a trip through degeneracy and depravity.
Well, I learned a valuable lesson.
It's not really hardly at all about his Wall Street activities.
Damn, I thought it was going to be an educational thing. Oh boy. Well, anyways, I'll watch it with my wife, maybe when the kids aren't around. Okay, Robert, I guess it's the big news of the week. I've been watching. So first of all, I watched Robert Gouvea's breakdown, explanation of the whole Trump request for a continuance. I'm trying to get, the differing points on this. We've talked about how the federal indictment was going to proceed, how a criminal federal trial proceeds, how long it takes, how it's, they set the tentative or the initial trial date knowing that it's never going to be respected. It takes, 2 years, Robert, to get to a typical federal criminal trial?
A complex white collar case, usually 18 months. 18
months now, and I'm reading the filings. I'm listening to analyses. I even went to CNN, and they had a decent guy on who said, "Look, typically it's 18 to 24 months. Trump he's not abusing of any process here. It would actually be outlandish to think you'd get a December trial date, but then you have the Anderson Coopers and the others pontificating that Trump's lawyers, and you'll flesh this out a little more for us, they need to apply for clearance so they can see the alleged classified documents that are at the source of the indictment. And Anderson Cooper's like, well, shouldn't they just, do that? Doesn't it? And the guy who's answering him was like, those documents take like a week to fill out. They ask for everything in your history. And so now you have the government that's prosecuting Trump determining whether or not his attorneys get clearance to look at the documents. So the whole thing is outlandish. Trump asked, the big news of the week, and people are like, oh, he's gaming for delays. He asked for an indefinite postponement of the trial because the initial August date obviously was never going to get respected. As far as I understand, Robert, they need to set this date for the protection of the defendant, not for no other reason, so that the defendant benefits from the right to a speedy trial and the defendant can agree or not to postponements, which are basically systematic because a lot of stuff needs to get done before you get to trial. In this case, they had an initial August date. They request a continuance. Jack, whatever his name is, asks for it until December. Trump says, look, indefinite. We've got a number of preliminary motions to dismiss, constitutional challenges, discovery, et cetera, et cetera. Let's not even schedule a pro forma date. Do it indefinitely. And now everybody in the media is saying he's gaming the system for a delay until after the election because he's a crook and a thief and a liar and yada, yada, yada. You'll let us know what you think. This is standard. It's unreasonable to think that you would have a trial by December, but even before the election. It might even be constitutionally insulting to suggest that you should have a criminal trial when this would be the issue for the election in and of itself. Robert, I've been rambling for long enough. What do you think about all this?
Yeah, so there's two different provisions at issue. One is the Speedy Trial Clause of the U.S. Constitution, and the other is the Speedy Trial Act passed by Congress. The Speedy Trial Clause is just the accused. It's in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy a right to a speedy and public trial. The Speedy Trial Act goes further. It says the government and the public has an interest in the speedy trial. So the Supreme Court determined in 2006, Surdock, I think is the case, which said that the defendant's interest is not alone sufficient under the Speedy Trial Act, that you can take into consideration the public and prosecutorial interest in a speedy trial as well. But the government requested it without really strong, compelling grounds for why the trial date in December is practical. The defense objection is solid, but not spectacular. So in a case like what they did is they filed the kind of motion to continue, or effectively it's a motion to continue the currently calendar trial date. It's just an opposition to the motion to continue the government filed for December. They want a motion to continue. It's currently trial is scheduled for August, is to be indefinite after the election with just status conferences scheduled. I think they would have been better off putting a specific date on there, but putting that aside, because there's some language in the Speedy Trial Act that can be interpreted to mean you have to set a specific date. There's judges who recognize that the courts generally don't require that if you give the good cause exceptions. But, this judge has typically been more of a rocket docket, quick judge, Judge Cannon. So even though she's a Trump appointee who's expressed skepticism about aspects of this case during the search warrant stage of it, and recognize the uniqueness and the extraordinary nature of it, she is someone that is inclined to set specific dates and go quicker rather than slower. Under the Speedy Trial Act, there are many grounds to continue. That include to extend the date. So basically, the Speedy Trial Act says you got to hold trial within 70 days of arraignment. And but it says what should not be counted within those 70 days is any time needed for an interlocutory appeal, any time needed for dealing with any pretrial motion, any time needed for the defense under ends of justice. And the ends of justice, they have to make specific findings, verbally or in writing, on the following factors. The case is unusual. The case is complex. The case has novel facts. The case has novel law. The case has pretrial proceedings that will require unusual preparation. Or, these are all or, reasonable time necessary for effective preparation of the defense counsel, given due diligence the defense counsel must engage.
These would have applied to Trump had they been ands, conjunctive ands. I mean, this is each and every...
Exactly. I mean, even if it was ands, yes. Now, I'll lay out what their motion laid out and lay out where I think they could have been a lot better. But what they laid out are the unique, novel, complex facts. This is a case that they are trying to schedule in the middle of a presidential election. It is an incumbent indicting his opponent. It is the first ever indictment of a former president. It is the first ever indictment of the leading opponent of the incumbent administration. That the review for classification principles has all kinds of problems. Problem one is them even getting a chance to review it due to the delays in the authorization process. The second problem is only they can review it. They can't subcontract it out to anybody. For those that don't know, in a criminal case, white-collar cases, lawyers often subcontract that out to sometimes it's with it in-house, other paralegals, other associates, forensic investigators. But there's third-party firms that specialize in just helping you index, organize, do the discovery review, put it in a searchable database. They can't allow that in this case because they have to physically, personally review every single one. Can't give anybody access to it at all to even organize it or index it, which makes it unusually, extraordinarily difficult. And then there's, under the classification review procedure, what's also unique about the case is they have to submit in advance to the court what documents they want to publicly publish. It's a whole specialized protocol. And they're saying a lot of this is not really classified, but that's going to be subject to a separate pretrial proceeding. Whether or not certain things we've even been given under the grounds that they're too classified for us is going to be subject to a separate pretrial proceeding. The government wants to introduce some of this as secret evidence. We oppose that entirely. But basically, the classification review procedure are unique, unusual, complex questions of both fact and law that are novel to the case. Then they say, look, there's going to be natural delays here because of the limited personnel. Then they say there's also something that's very unique and novel and complex about the case is how the heck are we going to pick a jury in the middle of a presidential election? And then they talk about the unique legal issues. The unique legal issues include the Presidential Records Act, include the classification questions that are come at issue, whether the special counsel even had authorization to bring this. And then they mention all the preparation issues, that they have already been discovery delays. There's going to be extensive pretrial motion practice, that it took the government more than a year with much more resources than they have to even bring prosecution, that there's already more than 800,000 pages of discovery, more than 100,000 emails, 57 terabytes of CCTV footage, and that there's more to come and more to fight over.
And I'll just play the devil's advocate because I've been listening to too much CNN. Oh, there's 80,000 documents, but only what did they say? 4,600 were relevant. Oh yeah, we've got months of CCTV footage, but the government's telling you only this is relevant. Oh yeah, they need special access to the classified documents, but they can have a team look at the documents that are not classified. I mean,
the problem with any claim like that, and governments often do, is they wouldn't have produced it if it wasn't material.
Well, that's it. I'm gonna let the person prosecuting me tell me what they've selected from an exorbitant amount of documents as being the relevant part. Don't worry about the rest of it. There could be exculpatory stuff in there that was not brought to my attention.
And the federal government doesn't have an open file policy. So anything they produce is an implicit admission that it is material to the case.
I'm sorry.
They may not plan.
What does that mean? An open file policy?
So an open file is you turn over everything you have in your case. Federal government does not utilize that standard. They only give you what they feel they are obligated to give you. They don't give you everything that they have to give you. They don't give you everything they have. So that means when they give it to you, they're saying, by the way, this is material to your case. They may only want to use a small subset in their prosecution, but that's not the definition of materiality, because they wouldn't have given it to you if it was material. It's the stuff they're not planning on using that you really have to look at, because they're giving it to you because they're saying it's material, but it's not incriminatory. So that means it's probably exculpatory. So that is all exceptional grounds. And what I said at the very beginning was that it was highly unlikely that this case would take place before Election Day, and that it was much more likely that Election Day would be the de facto verdict day of America on this case. And I still stick to that. And I don't think the judge will grant the government a trial date in December. Even if the judge did, the defense can come back and continue to submit motions to continue as the record gets more thorough and developed. So I've had cases where the judge will set it saying, well, if you're really right, just come back in 2 months when you really have more record detail for me to find. I do think she's more inclined to give a set date, but I think if she gave a reasonable date, that date's going to be early 2025, just realistically. And then schedule some pretrial hearing dates, et cetera. I mean, by the December date this government was trying to set, they were saying the defense had to bring every single motion on the merits, every motion to dismiss.
But it's so Robert,
by the end of July.
But why? I mean, it's not even a plausible prospect to entertain, even to hear an appeal on an interlocutory decision in an ordinary one-issue case will take 6 to 12 months. It's what is the irrational Quixotean pursuit of the prosecution to get a trial before the election, where even everything they've done seems to be increasing Trump's numbers. Even if they get a conviction before the election, I think that would help Trump more. What is their irrational obsession with having a trial before?
Oh, because they know if Trump wins, the case is DOA. And so their only chance at securing a conviction that can even temporarily matter or to justify what they did is if it happens before election day. So they try to bring it quickly enough so that they could, in their minds, get it before election day. But it would be insane for a judge to give it to them before election day. And I don't think this judge is, even though she's a rocket docket judge, I don't think that's going to happen. Even if she were to temporarily set it that way, it will just be a temporary setting, trial date setting. So and I said this from the get-go, and people, Steve Dace was saying Trump will be in jail before election day. None of that was ever likely to happen.
Well, people freaking out about the August trial date. I mean, it's
and I kept trying to tell people that they have to schedule that because of the Speedy Trial Act until the court makes separate independent findings. That's all that meant. Procedurally, if you knew the history of white collar cases, I mean, I obviously do a lot of federal criminal defense work and have for about a quarter century. But, you could just research this a little bit and see, I mean, even the reality winner, those kind of cases that were much simpler and clear, those cases typically took almost a year and a half to get to trial. So it's inconceivable in a case with intensive documents, period, you get to trial quickly. And of course, he listed, there's already trial calendar conflicts for Trump. There's trial calendar conflicts for the lawyer. That's also a pertinent material issue. What I would say is I thought they could have done a much more thorough and robust presentation, because don't treat this like your typical case where you can just throw in your 5-page template of saying, look, here's all the complexities, judge, just kick it down the can, like you could a normal case. I mean, what they filed is something you would file in a normal case. Pretty basic, pretty simple, pretty straightforward, not too many legal issues, not too much previewing of your anticipated defenses. Here, I would have gone further. I also would have used it as an excuse to present to the court some of the underlying issues. And it concerns me a little bit that they may not even be thinking about these issues. So, like, I mean, I get my impeachment clause argument. I'm one of the only few people making that argument. I think they should make it. There's no downside to making it, but I recognize that that's not being universally suggested. But what is very commonly being suggested by lawyers who have studied this case is the Article 2 problems with the case. And they don't even mention Article 2. They seem locked into just now, the good news is they at least have woken up to the special counsel issues. That there are issues about how he procured the indictment. But there's also no recognition of the potential grand jury issues, the potential venue issues. They already know about some government misconduct issues, and they just chose not to mention them. I would have. So, I would have used, and I would have, for example, they could have gone through category by category and said, let's just look at the chance of interlocutory appeal here, Judge. Here's just some of the 6 different big constitutional issues or statutory interpretation issues we're going to deal with. That it's reasonable for the court to anticipate that the 11th Circuit Supreme Court might want to make a ruling on this. Interlocutory appeal by itself is going to delay a trial date. So why are we going to stick a trial date that we all know we're not going to stick with, that we all know we can't do, that the Court of Appeals or Supreme Court may intervene in? Why not put it off to a date that affords them opportunity and time to get involved, as we know that they're probably going to do anyway, and make clear, give a little preview to the court and to the court of public opinion that's reading these cases, what are all the big constitutional flaws? Like, they have some decent language in there about how extraordinary and unusual the cases, etc. But they could have developed further the selective prosecution issues. They don't. They could have developed further the Fourth Amendment implications on the search warrant. They don't. They could have implemented further the Fifth Amendment grand jury clause issues. They don't. They could have gone further on the Sixth Amendment violations of attorney-client privilege. They don't even discuss it. So, all of the failure to even talk about the Constitution is not a great indicator that this is going to be a top-notch defense team.
Well, when I'm looking over all this stuff, and I'm hearing your voice in the back of my head saying, this is the time to speak to the public, if not only to the court. And
because the media is going to try to spin it, right?
Well,
force those Constitution issues up there, and force them to even talk about or discuss it or circulate it, and get it out there thinking within the Republican audience, the conservative political audience, about how unconstitutional this prosecution is, and give a little sneak preview also to the court and the court's clerks. Here's where we're going. Here's where we're going. Here's where we're going. I fear that they didn't preview it because they're not cognizant of it.
Well, and knowing the way the prosecution and the media is going to spin, if it's not totally fleshed out and extremely well justified, they're going to say that, he's gaming the system for delays because he doesn't want a trial before. And they haven't explained it well enough why they need it. To me, it was so outlandish that you'd have this trial, knowing the preliminary motions on the constitutionality of certain laws, the procurement of documents, etc. It's unfeasible. It shouldn't even be an expectation in the public mind, but the media is what it is. And Anderson Cooper is who he is. And, these lawyers should have just filled out the documents and then, a week long to get clearance. And what they asked for.
Suggested that Anderson Cooper, former CIA guy, thinks, man, I get classified intel all the time with ease.
Okay, so then, and how long until the judge rules on this? I mean, it's not going to wait too long.
The government has a chance to file a reply. I don't know if they have yet, and then the court will definitely issue an order before the currently calendared trial date, and I assume also before the currently calendared motion date. So that would probably mean within the next 10 days, you'll see a decision from the court. I have no doubt she'll move the trial. The question is how far she moves it and whether she sets a date certain or not.
And the risk is they can't even concede. They say, okay, move it to July 20. What month are we going to be? July 2024.
You know why they moved it to December. They would have liked to have scheduled it for 2024, but they knew that
the primaries
right in the middle of it, and it would look bad. So that's why they have a problem. So, realistically, scheduling it for, I would have recommended, here's the normal time. They included the Noriega case, which was nice. I think it took almost 2 years to reach trial. I would have said, look, let's schedule this for the summer of 2025. That's a reasonable time frame. That's a 2-year time frame. That's still incredibly fast given the unique issues here. But let the court put a date on it and make it clear rather than indefinite. Maybe they're asking for indefinite because they're giving the court the option of splitting the baby and setting a definite date, but still in 2025. I anticipate this trial won't happen until after the election. Even if the court schedules an earlier date in the next 2 weeks, that date itself will get moved.
there'll be an appeal on an interim judgment that will take it past the 2024 election.
And the pretrial motions here are unusually complex and dense, and they're going to have huge fights over all kinds of things.
All right, now, if you see me like reaching under the table, it's because Pudge is down here. She's banging her head on my leg because she wants food, which I don't have because we ran out of food. Robert, I've realized now I haven't done any of the Rumble rants. Let's take a few minutes just to go through these. And we're going to go bottom to top because that's the order. Okay, let me read these real fast. M. Sidloy, great stream on Friday, David. Just one thing, Libs of TikTok's name is Shaya, and that's Chaya in Hebrew, okay? On reading right to left. Please tell me you guys will cover Tucker ruining political careers on Blaze, Ryu, Kirito. Robert, you saw Mike Pence?
Oh, yeah. No surprise. None of those people can hold up to any serious scrutiny.
Oh, God. Pence walked into it twice. Okay. We got Randy Edwards said, you know who else will never let you forget you are Jewish? Your Jewish mother. Okay. Arkansas crime attorney. Setting in Memphis, preparing for trial next week and needed a break. What a great way to break. Catching Viva live. I bought Jen yourself for my wife, and we love it. I'm going to snip and clip that, and that's going to be part of the ad going forward because people do rave about it. It's weird. Oblividan, Mr. Barnes, do you think we will ever find out how many feds and Fed assets were involved in instigating chaos on January 6th? We're not going to get a number. We know it's a lot. We'll see if Tucker gets to, re-interview the guy that he interviewed while he was at Fox, that they fired him before they aired it and didn't air it. M. Menarath, Barnes, you should read the Senate discussions on the 14th. They cover this topic. Viva, my rant last week was on veterans' disability, not Virginia. I had family court illegally apportionment.
Yeah, and I have read it. And the on the 14th, and what they really meant by subject to a foreign power was along the lines of aristocracy, diplomats, etc. Not that both of your parents had to be U.S. citizens.
And then Rock Bottom 56 says, even immigrants who came here under false pretenses, general malaise. Oh, general malaise is English. Under Trump Vivek's logic, wouldn't naturalized citizen parents result in natural-born citizen child? In this way, children of non-citizens would still have a path to make their children citizens. We're not going to harp over this. Grotesque spearball. Wow. Cup of Sooth. Barnes is wrong. The office of the 14th said so. It did not even apply to Native Americans, and no SCOTUS opinion supports.
Native Americans were always exempt for a whole different provisions under the U.S. Constitution. There's a bunch of provisions that are specifically applied to members of Indian tribes.
Cup of Sooth. If the 14th Amendment did not apply to Native Americans, please explain how it applied to illegal immigrants. I'll wait.
Yeah, Indian tribes are specifically put into separate provisions within the untaxed Indians, etc. That's a whole different discussion about the nature of that.
Arkansas crime attorney, Rumble has dropped a little. This is by way of stock price. Viva, start pushing a little more. No, I do not. No, I'm not getting sued for pushing securities. I just purchased more when it dropped because I expect it to go up, not financial or legal advice. Get Tucker to join. I could retire. TX47, do we really believe the government has not done enough of a deep dive on Donald Trump's legal counsel to know whether they are worthy of security clearance? I mean, it's idiotic. Il Sarto, sorry, I'm a little behind. Maybe you and your people should call out these. Okay, I'm not even going to have that soundbite circulating the internet. It is my responsibility. Okay, it both amazes and saddens me how much I wish to join CSIS. In high school to know how obviously despise the intel agencies and they've broken their oaths and those they sort of protect. I'm not your buddy guy. Britt Cormier, how do you pick a jury to review classified docs? Interesting question. Do they get redacted copies of the docs or do they all have to pass a background clearance check? Robert, how's that going to work logistically?
That's where the defense has to make presentations to the court, and the court has to make pretrial rulings on what information will be published and what wouldn't. But the jury has to see it in order to be able to adequately make a trial on it. So the jury has to see all of it, and the jury, they cannot require classification requirements of. That would be a violation of the jury trial impartiality provisions.
I Care 22, love your show. Learn, enjoy, and entertained. Just join Rubble, Cheryl Gage, Amaretta, Stingray. Could they be prosecuting Trump to hamstring his next presidency like they did with the Russia hoax? Robert, I'm going to ask this question.
He walks right in and he pardons himself, so that ends that.
Yeah, but it'll cast the same shadow that, the Russia hoax.
He won't care at that stage.
What does it say?
And verdict day will have been election day, so he'll have all the authority he wants to do it.
Well, I got a question that Brandon Strzok brought up in a tweet yesterday. We're going to get to that before we go into the next topic. Last one, praying hard for Trump, the judge, the Trump team, and this constant evil. Thanks, Barnes, for a little white pill. Robert, hold on. Let me break this out. Take this out. Bring this in. Robert, I've got a question for this, and Brandon Strock raises an interesting point. Not this one. Here. I won't play the whole video. I'll send everybody the link so you can go watch it.
Earlier today,
here,
Donald
listen.
Trump put out a post on Truth Social asking the question why he was being charged under the Insurrection Act and not Joe Biden. He then deleted the post on Truth Social and replaced it with the same post, replacing the words Insurrection Act with Espionage Act.
Okay, we'll pause it there. I'm going to give everybody the link. You can go watch that full video. Brandon theorizes or hypothesizes, if I can get this out of here, that maybe Trump knows that they're going to go after him under the Insurrection Act so that they can then get him off the ballot because that would disqualify him.
That won't work either.
Okay, well, just to quell everybody's concerns, logically, legally, conceivably, what could they do to keep Trump off the ballot of the presidential election?
Nothing. Even liberals have admitted this. Liberals have said there's no change. James Comey admitted it. There's nothing to keep him off the ballot.
They also admitted that they can't do
they're not going to
loan
get
forgiveness.
courts. They're not going to get states and courts to go along with him being kept off the ballot. It's not going to happen.
And if there's anomalies, what if a state says, "Oh, I thought I was doing the right thing legally," and
it doesn't matter. The courts will take it out. It's not something that will happen. So it's never been something that was an achievable objective. They couldn't keep Eugene V. Debs off the ballot while he was in prison. So it's not something that's practical to. It's already a misapplication of the attempts to use the 14th Amendment in that manner. But even if they were to somehow indict him under the Insurrection Act, could somehow get a trial done before Election Day, somehow get him a conviction, somehow get the entire thing affirmed, almost all of which is extremely difficult to see happening. The courts are still not going to strike him off the ballot. And so even if states try to, and which states are going to, there's not enough states to do so. Again, he just needs to win a majority of electoral votes. Doesn't matter if Democrats keep him off the ballot, Democratic states, so what? If he's not on the ballot in California, so what? Not on the ballot in New York, so what? Has no impact. So but the courts aren't going to go along with it because it's too much of an embarrassment. The Constitution is clear on the limited qualifications necessary for the ballot. They've enforced that in every case that's ever been adjudicated. They've said we're not allowing a person to be taken off the ballot for anything that doesn't meet the qualifications, period. And they've said this over and over, whether it's McCain cases, Obama cases, left cases, right cases. The only context in which any court has said the state can keep someone off the ballot is if they admit in their qualifying papers they're not qualified. I actually had that case because I was trying to argue that that's a decision for Congress, not the courts, which, by the way, most scholars agree with. It was Kaczynski that screwed around in that case, in my view. I got to bring that up with him next time I talk with him. Now that he's no longer in the Ninth Circuit. Because Kaczynski made the point. He goes, "Well, Mr. Barnes, are you saying they can put Bugs Bunny on the ticket on the ballot?" And my response was, "Your Honor, I think a lot of voters would have thought Bugs Bunny was a better candidate." This was after the 2012 election.
Just so everybody knows, you're talking about Judge Kaczynski. I forget his first name, not Ted Kaczynski.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Alex Kaczynski.
Sorry.
He was on the panel with you out at Freedom Fest a year ago. This ship has sailed, and it's not even liberals aren't even saying they can get this. There's some few lefties out there that are desperate for it, but even liberal lawyers that hate Trump are admitting he's going to be on the ballot. That courts are not going to go. They're not even going to try to push that route, because they want to selectively use the 14th Amendment argument for selective controversial people where they can try to set a precedent for future use. They know as soon as they go at someone like Trump with it, then it will look purely political, the indictment, and courts will look horrible. Courts don't want to keep all of a sudden leading presidential candidates off the ballot. Courts can often be lazy. They can often be corrupt. They're not incorrigibly stupid. They understand the court of public opinion, and they're not going to take that past that path. They're not willing to go past that Rubicon. That's what I've tried to explain to people. It's like courts are, you often can't get the relief or remedy you want from them, but anybody expecting them to just completely abandon everything and just say, screw it, in the name of defeating Trump, let's just abandon all our credibility and have half the country in an uproar, that they're not willing to do.
Before we get on to the Ray Epps defamation lawsuit, I just want to bring up two more here because
we got the January 6 cases before that.
Oh, yeah. Okay, fine. My bad. Arkansas crime attorney who is Little Rock on YouTube, who is a practicing attorney, says, I agree with Robert on the 14th And then Amandine said, here's some bucks to buy food for your doggy. Seriously, though, love your podcast. Barnes is great, too. Thank you very much. No, it's not. We didn't run out of money or food. I just left the dog food in my mother-in-law's freezer. And I asked my wife to get just like raw beef. So we'll just give her raw beef tonight. And that's it. Okay, so hold on. January 6th comes before... Oh, yeah, I highlighted Epps death. Okay, Robert. Hey, look, another white pill. The one lucky bastard gets off. So he was acquitted by the judge. This is one of the defendants of January 6th. Basically, I forget the other guy's name, but same type of defense. Like I wasn't there to do anything. There was no pre-planning. I didn't do anything violent there. I thought I was allowed to be on, and I left when I wasn't. This one schnook, in addition to the other one, gets acquitted. The other people not so lucky. One of his co-defendants was found guilty because he was friends with either the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers. I get those mixed up all the time. Oath Keepers. How is it an acquittal? Did this guy opt for a bench trial, or did they make a motion to get it dismissed before it went to a jury trial?
Smart lawyer who read the judge. This is a very hostile judge to most January 6th.
Yes, that's the other thing that surprised me.
Judge Mehdi. But my interpretation is it's a defense lawyer that read the judge right. And so convinced the government to dismiss all the charges except the obstruction counts. So he didn't face, misdemeanor, trespass, or any of those counts. So it was just, was he there to obstruct the certification of the Electoral College? Which was also smart because that preserved any appellate issues on whether that could even apply to these circumstances. We'll get to that's the Norm Pattis Supreme Court case that may go up. So he read it, and he had a guy that was in musicals and an actor, and he said, yeah, he joined Oath Keepers, but he just thought they were a peace group. There was no evidence of any pretrial communication that he engaged in. There was no violence that he engaged in. He just entered the Capitol. That's all they had. He entered the Capitol, member of the Oath Keepers. That was it. The government thought with this judge that was enough to convict him of the higher felony charge of obstruction. They misread the judge because the judge wasn't willing to go that far. And the defense lawyer, successfully made he had his client throw the Oath Keepers under the bus. Say, I thought they were just a peacekeeping group. I thought that's what that meant. I had no idea. I'm an actor. I'm traveling around. I go down there. I just walk in the Capitol. I didn't plan to obstruct anything. I didn't know, and they didn't have any evidence to that. And so the judge drew a distinction, and thus gave him an acquittal. But it was a smart move of the defense team for him to, one, get the other charges dismissed, and two, make it a bench trial, because truth is in D.C., jury still would have convicted him. Given how bad the DC juries are. Well, so it's the only there's only been 2 acquittals so far, both by judges in the January 6 cases.
Robert, I was reading the Courthouse News article he sent me. Like, I don't like this either, because he still said, I love Big Brother at the end of this. It's like, prosecutors claim Beeks was a member of the Oath Keepers, a far-right militia group. Beeks, meanwhile, said he'd been duped into believing that the Oath Keepers were a peacekeeping group, a contention that Mehdi, that's the judge, seems to have found at least partially convincing. It's like, even
it was a smart move by the defense lawyer, right? The judge hates Oath Keepers, so you throw them under the bus. Man, I'm just a nice, naive dude. Look at how bad this organization is, Judge. They fooled a sweetheart like me.
Well, he was in a play. Jesus Christ Superstar is the play that he was doing the tour on when he was arrested. And I think
that had a lot to do with, okay, this guy's like in music. He's not sending random threats. He's not doing, he didn't fit the kind of person the judge wanted to punish. And that was a good read by the defense lawyer that they recognized that.
And I think
bad read by the government that they went along with it.
Played Judas in Jesus Christ Superstar. I don't know what role Judas played in that play. I think I know what role he played in life. But Robert, you said he gets acquitted because the best they had is that he didn't mean anything. There was no violence, no threats, no nothing. But then I look at Adam Johnson, the lectern guy, and I don't see much more with him except his theft of the lectern, which he never had any intention of stealing to begin with. So I mean, some people I think did as little as this guy.
I think
and got
he
convicted.
Pled, didn't he?
He yes, he did. Yeah. Okay.
So they never faced trial, but it's because how hostile the DC jury pools are. But in the same week, we had that as a January 6th case. We had a ridiculous denial of bail. A guy who was accused of 2 misdemeanors had been saying a bunch of stupid stuff online, but he isn't being charged with any of this stupid stuff online. And so he's only being charged with misdemeanors. The judge denied him bail for misdemeanors, frankly unheard of in the federal criminal justice system, on the grounds that she was worried he might be a threat to the community. What she really means is his politics. But obviously it said dumb stuff, but that should not matter for bail. The Eighth Amendment requires that she admitted he was no flight risk.
Here it says, so this is the other case. Magistrate Judge Zia Faruqi said he was ordered, his name's not Tarantino, it's Taranto, to await his trial behind bars because of a string of threatening statements and actions he had made in the days leading up to his June 30 arrest, including a since-deleted live stream he posted while driving to the National Institute for Standards and Technology, in which he allegedly threatened to blow up his car. How do you do that?
Well, again, if he's prosecuted with that, different story. Obviously, there's something that they're not telling us, including the judge, because he hasn't been indicted for any of those things. Only indicted on 2 misdemeanors. So being a big talker has no bearing on bail. I mean, the Supreme Court Salerno case 5-4 made up case because the defense lawyers were no longer even actively pursuing the case at the time, said that you could extend bail to not just whether someone was a flight risk, but whether there was clear and convincing evidence under the Bail Reform Act of 1984 as to whether or not, I think Salerno was decided in 86, as to whether Rehnquist, a lot of so-called conservatives don't care about that part of the Constitution. And as long as there were clear convincing evidence, they were a risk to the community in certain ways, to the safety. Mm-hmm. But that has to be specific findings. It's supposed to be limited to when you're charged with specific dangerous crimes. It's not supposed to be a random minority report mechanism to lock people up pending trial.
It's what they did in Canada for the truckers, inciting mischief. Oh, we know that this person is going to go back on social media, or they can't be controlled. They said they'll go and speak and defy the court orders. So pretrial detention. And Robert,
I hope the defense lawyer pursues it to the district court, Court of Appeals, and the the Supreme Court, because the bail abuses have been ridiculous in these DC cases, and they're just getting worse.
Yeah, and then meanwhile, we go and lecture, or we attempt to lecture other autocrats, tyrants, other people for abusing the judicial system. Although who knows, Robert? Maybe if he appeals it, he's going to get sanctioned like Kari Lake's lawyers, which we're going to get to in a bit. Okay, so Jan 6, one good news, and it's not enough of a good news because they still destroyed this person on the process. And then the more bad news, they're political prisoners, period.
Two other briefly mentioned January 6 cases before we get to Epps. Owen Schroyer did a plea deal. I assume the plea deal is that he's not going to do any time, but I don't know. He was charged misdemeanor trespass, as I recall. Norm Pattis is his lawyer. And then Norm Pattis is bringing a petition before the Supreme Court on one of the January 6 cases on the obstruction issues that we've discussed. So, we'll debrief that further when it gets closer to the Supreme Court deciding whether or not to take the case. But the issue is the misapplication of the obstruction statute. Because in my view, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, overruling the district court that dismissed on obstruction grounds, basically defined a protest as obstruction. They didn't easily carve out when it could or couldn't be. And that shows how preposterous the obstruction statutes are.
All right. It's... Has Vivek mentioned, a blanket pardon for the nonviolent Jan 6ers? Has he mentioned that recently, or that hasn't sort of?
I think he reaffirmed that both in he said January 6th that he thought was a product of censorship in the Tucker interview, and I believe he discussed it at the Turning Point presentation, where other than Trump, he had the strongest reaction to. I mean, it was so bad that DeSantis and Scott and Haley all refused to go to the Turning Point event. So it gives you an idea of that they know that the base doesn't like them at all.
Robert, you, another thing that you predicted way back in the day that I hope does not come to fruition, but I can definitely see how it does, is that DeSantis will have killed his state political career.
I think he's killing everything, slowly, surely, and steadily. It's a kamikaze campaign to end his political future. They used his ambition against him successfully. Yeah, I think he's got 2 months to get out to try to preserve his legacy. I don't think he's smart enough to do it.
And if he gets out and endorses Trump and gets on the bandwagon, that could preserve some goodwill. Oi, all right.
You got to come to Trump Jesus for contrition.
Well, that's going to be used against you later by someone, Robert. They're going to snip and clip that right there. Okay, let's get to Ray Epps, Robert. Mind-blowing. So I read through the lawsuit sometime last week. Ray Epps actually had the balls to sue Fox News in Delaware. Now, Cernovich actually replied to a tweet of mine where I was saying, oh, he only seems to have sued Fox in Delaware, didn't sue Darren Beattie, didn't sue Revolver, didn't sue Tucker Carlson. So none of these other people are now parties to the suit who could avail themselves to their procedural litigious rights in the suit. He only sued Fox News and only sued it in Delaware. Cernovich, tell me if he's right, said that Delaware does not have strong anti-SLAPP suits or anti-SLAPP legislation, and also that Fox News is the only one that might bend over, pay Ray Epps to make it go away, and thus, I don't know, engage in political money laundering. The lawsuit, nobody needs to read it, but you can. I'll snip and clip that. But basically says Fox News, through Tucker Carlson, through I think Laura Ingraham, defamed Ray Epps by saying or suggesting that he was a federal agent there as a paid or a agent provocateur, as an agent to stir up shit. Whether or not that's a statement of opinion based on the facts of he's there on camera saying we need to go into the Capitol, that'll be a legal argument. When they call him an agent provocateur or a Fed, is that a statement of opinion based on the facts which are undeniable, or is that a statement of facts susceptible of defamation? Sued on defamation and false light. I guess Delaware has a false light provision of law. False light is similar to defamation in that it causes personal harm, but defamation is based on more reputational damage. False light is not the same thing as public disclosure of a private fact, which would mean the fact is true, but it does damage by being disclosed. What did I miss? What's your take? Is this a strategic settle this lawsuit, launder some money, line the coffers of Ray Epps so that he can run off into the moonlight with a piggy bank to live off of? Is Fox News a deep state asset? Are they going to fight this properly, or are they going to just bend over and be the tool to the administrative state anti-Trumpers that they seem to be proving themselves to be? What's your take?
So, I mean, substantively, I don't think there's a strong case for Epps. I mean, especially if the Delaware courts apply any consistency, which is still an open question, because these are the same Delaware courts that said Candace Owens couldn't sue because everything was protected opinion. So are they going to apply the same standards when it applies to these clearly opinion statements? They're opinion statements based on disclosed facts. So if you make an opinion statement based on undisclosed facts, then you can claim the undisclosed facts are a lie. But if you disclose the facts and then give your opinion, that's classic constitutionally protected opinion about someone who may consider himself an involuntary public figure, but a public figure nevertheless under the circumstances. So I don't think the private figure standards would likely or probably apply, especially because he himself has availed himself of media and press coverage. So before some of these statements that he's complaining of were made. I think procedurally it's correct that he's suing in Delaware to avoid the anti-SLAPP laws that might apply if he were to sue Darren Beattie or the Revolver or to sue Tucker Carlson. It is also probably the case that he's suing, your analysis, I think, is correct, that he's avoiding those individuals who may have an independent interest in litigating the case, may not be insured by the same set of entities, may reject that insurance for the purposes of litigating the case, may want to proceed into discovery and information he would not want to divulge or disclose as a process of the case. And so then the only question is why? Given it appears to be a weak case, why is he pursuing it? And the two possibilities that I see are either everybody sees Fox as weak at the moment, or Fox's insurer is weak at the moment. They're writing huge, ridiculous checks to some preposterous claims. Not only the ludicrous amount paid to Dominion, over $700 million, but then they turn around and paying somebody who is suing over Tucker on a ridiculous claim, and they pay that out like $12 million or some preposterous amount. So right now they appear to be screaming, "We're a blank check, please sue us." That could be part of it, or as you note, it could all just be one big money laundering effort to get him money without it looking like Fox is part of a scheme to cover up what took place in January 6th by paying him directly as some sort of consultant. Instead, they pay him because they had to, because they were sued. It's a very creative mechanism of money laundering, but it's not one you can rule out in these circumstances.
The question I had, Robert, insofar they're not named defendants, but they're very much interested parties. Could Darren Beattie and Tucker Carlson I don't know if the term is implead in the United States. Can they not ask to join this lawsuit?
No, they can't.
There's no way that they can get involved. I mean, it's like, is it not defamatory to them to have a guy sue alleging that he defamed, that they defamed him?
All court pleadings are immune from suit, so you can't sue based on anything that happened or said in court.
So he can't intervene. He can't request to be an amicus, like, submit filings. Is Fox News potentially that dirty that they are so anti-Trumper that they would participate in quelling what was obviously, it's not a conspiracy. Ray Epps is on video saying, I don't even want to say what we have to do because I'll get arrested for it. And then he says, we need to go into the Capitol. They call him a Fed there. He's there the day of, saying, this is where we're going. This is where our problems lie. He's there breaching a fence violently. Whether or not he's pushing it and doing violence, he's there partaking in the violence and breaching, going into a restricted area. That's all on video. Is Fox potentially that much of a never Trumper that they would partake in some scheme to try to rehabilitate Ray Epps?
If they settle at all, then yes.
Okay,
that's the reasonable inference. I mean, their behavior has made no sense. I mean, this is the same Fox that gave away their key moneymaker in Tucker Carlson. And if they had any doubts about its impact, they have lost more than half of their young primetime audience. And not just during Tucker's time slot, during every time time slot. So, I mean, you multiply that money-wise, it's more, it should be impact more than half of their advertising revenue. I mean, it was an insane action. And they know that, and yet have taken no action to remedy it. So, the people running Fox are incompetent, incapable. The second generation, Murdoch always relied upon Roger Ailes to keep the political antenna afoot. And even Ailes was often behind the Times on a range of topics and subjects, but not nearly as far behind as Rupert Murdoch is, and nowhere near where his idiot kids are.
All right. Good. I feel better in my assessment. It does not make any sense. And if this settles, and if it settles quickly for a sum undisclosed, holy crab apples, Fox will be beyond irrelevant to me. But if you get one more from Arkansas crime attorney, looks politically motivated, Robert. I agree with you in almost all cases, but not here. Now, I don't remember what that was for exactly. All right. Robert, you send me gerrymandering cases. I immediately tune out. I read about a page and a half in. I don't understand. I mean, they all seem to be one and the same. We're arguing over how we subdivide the electoral district for the upcoming elections. Did you ever explain what gerrymandering means, or how, not know what it means, but how it came to be the term? Like, why is it called gerrymandering?
Oh, that I used to know, but that I don't remember.
All right. And now I immediately shut off, Robert. This is another case of unfair contested redistricting coming out of New York. I stopped reading after 2 pages. Tell people why they should care.
So what happened in 2014, New York voters voted to change their constitution so that the legislature no longer did the redistricting each 10 years. So the way it works, once the census does a census every 10 years, usually each state legislature, but these days increasingly independent commissions, redistrict their seats, state house seats, state senate seats, city council, county commission, and congressional seats. From a federal perspective, the big one is the congressional seats, the house seats. And what happened is New York was irritated at all the redistricting fights coming out of the New York state legislature. So the people said, screw it, we're just going to have an independent commission do it. And the way it worked is an independent commission was bipartisan. It would propose a map. If they couldn't agree on the map, then or they send it to the legislature for an approval process. And if there has to be yes or no, and if that doesn't work, then you do a second map. And if that doesn't work, then the legislature in certain instances could try to maybe take control. So, but the first time this was going to be tested was after 2020. They came up with a first map that the legislature rejected. They wouldn't come up with a second map. And so the legislature said, screw it, we're going to do our own map. And they changed the laws again, presuming they could just override their own state constitution. Court stepped in and said, no, you can't override the Constitution. So I guess in the interim, since we're on the eve of the 22 elections, the court will draw the map. That map produced a Republican landslide in 2022. And so Democrats have been desperate to get that map set aside ever since. So they relitigated the issue, and they went up to the equivalent of New York's highest court, the Court of Appeals, because the Supreme Court of New York is called the trial court there. And in fact, it's at every level of the system is called Supreme Court. It'll be Supreme Court or Supreme Court, Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals, 4-3 split decision. Most of the issues being who had standing to sue and the rest, but the majority said, yeah, they have right to sue, and said, look, the way this is supposed to work is a mandamus action, which is when a government agent has a non-discretionary mandatory duty to do something and isn't doing it. You can go to the court that says issue a writ of mandamus that they do so immediately. And the argument was the independent commission was obligated under the New York State Constitution to submit a second map that it never had. And by a 4-3 decision, the court agreed and issued the writ of mandamus saying you got to issue a second map. And so that's all that happened. The concern is that the new map, even though it's supposed to be a bipartisan commission, will be less favorable to Republicans than it was before, but we'll have to see how all that shakes out. I think as a decision, I don't really disagree with the decision. I do think the independent commission failed to do its duty.
And now I was going to pull up the duty, but instead I got an email in real time, Robert. I don't know if I can quote the source. Someone who sends me some stuff says, Dear Viva, gerrymandering is a team for redistricting done in Massachusetts when Elbridge Gerry was governor. Elbridge Gerry. So, okay. So Gerry.
So because he did it or they screwed him?
Hold on, I'm going to go to the Wikipedia link. It says, in representative democracies, gerrymandering originally is the political manipulation of electoral districts, yada, yada, yada. Etymology. Originally gerrymandered. The name was Jerry, and the animal salamander was used for the first time in the Boston Gazette. Yada. This was created in reaction to the redrawing of Massachusetts Senate election districts under Governor Elbridge Gerry, later Vice President of the United States. Gerry, who personally disapproved of the practice, signed a bill that redistricted Massachusetts for the benefit of the Democratic-Republican Party. When mapped, one of the contorted districts in the Boston area was said to resemble a mythological salamander. Appearing with the term and helping spread and sustain its popularity was a political cartoon depicting... Okay, he did it. He did it.
Proof, everybody at vivabarneslaw.locals.com is above average.
Yeah, this is one of my trusty sends me very interesting stuff to read. Not everybody has my email address. Okay, so now, it's cool. It's another one of those stories. I mean, the gerrymandering. It's funny. I don't know how you ever redistrict without it screwing somebody. Is there not a way just to not redistrict? Just agree on what's a fair way to do it randomly and not based on
well, that's what these commissions kind of are.
Yeah,
but what you could do is you could have statewide elections and things like that. And that might and just whoever gets so many votes then gets seated. Top 9 vote getters get seats. For example, you have 9 seats. You could do it, but it's up to each state how they do it, and they don't like that because they love their gerrymandering power.
Oh, yep, that is okay.
But speaking of elections. Some big news out of Arizona.
So hold on. Maybe I have different news. I think I might have read something different than... Was it about the lawyers being sanctioned for $122,000 in legal fees?
Not, because I think that's the federal court case that's ongoing where they're trying to go after Dershowitz and all that.
Yeah, the Dershowitz has to pay he's on the hook solidarily for $12,400 or something.
Yeah, it's a mistake for them to whack Dershowitz. I think that's going to go up on appeal. And I think it's going to get overturned. If they would have kept Dershowitz out, they probably could have got away with it. But that court is so egotistical, it can't help itself. A lot of federal courts in Arizona that way. I've had the distinct displeasure being in many federal courts in Arizona and not being very fond of any of those federal courts, frankly, that I've experienced. I've got them overturned repeatedly, though, to my great privilege and pleasure, but including in some real big cases. But it's Kari Lake has petitioned to transfer her case directly to the Arizona Supreme Court, and the judge finally issued a decision in the attorney general race and the Abe Hamada race as well.
Okay, so let's start with the Kari Lake petitioning. What is the purpose of that? To skip a certain litigation process, expedite it to the highest court of the land of the Arizona land.
Yep. And the Court of Appeals was doing weird stuff. They were transferring it from one Court of Appeals to another Court of Appeals. So Kari Lake's team was like, this is getting squirrely. So they went right to the Arizona Supreme Court and said, look, we got big issues that have never been addressed. We have by the Arizona Supreme Court. This is still concerning the election. Let's get this cleaned up and wrapped up quicker rather than later. Go ahead and take it. You might as well, and then decide one way or the other, however you're going to decide. And they focused on all the issues that the trial court had not addressed, including the new evidence, what the new evidence meant and didn't mean. And in particular, I thought what was really smart about her petition was highlighting the signature process and I think correctly interpreting what the trial court did, rather than get caught in the weeds of a factually dense issue that Supreme High Appellate courts hate to deal with. Said, look, what the district trial court really did was say that whether or not the statute's requirement that the election officials compare signatures, is that subject to judicial review or not? Because the court said, no, it's not even subject to judicial review. I think that's a correct interpretation of what the court did. That thereby presents a neat and narrow legal issue for the Arizona Supreme Court to decide. Does a court have authority to interpret and enforce the meaning of the word compare in signatures? Or is it so vague and so obscure that it means nothing and there's no judicial review even capable of the executive branch's obligations in that respect? I think that's their best legal issue. I think it's a nice, narrow, neat legal issue. And clearly, quite frankly, the judge is wrong because they compare signatures all the time in a range of other contexts. So the idea this is beyond judicial review, beyond judicial understanding of what the statute means, contradicts a long line and litany of cases, including those in Arizona courts. So the compare, everybody knows what compare means. It means more than 2 seconds. I mean, that's what it means.
It means do what they did in California for that district. What was his name? It was a French name, Gascon. Do it for what they did for the other one there, Newsom. Like they disqualified more than 0.02% of the ballots for whatever the reason. And even if you only went by the signature verification with Gascon, it was 9,000 of it was like a couple of percent, which would have been more than enough in Kari Lake's case. Yeah, the woodpecker is what the lawyer called it. Just like tick tick tick. And then 100% approval.
Abe Hamada, the judge who had to issue an order on Friday, finally did, though without much explanation as to what his order was.
Well, that's it. It's coming literally. It's coming Monday. Apparently, there was a fire, Robert. There's literally a fire that prevented the judge from issuing the motivated ruling. We'll get the details tomorrow. Abe Hamada, he was asking for a retrial on his unsuccessful first trial I don't know if it was overturned, but rather properly count. He had a marginal differential between victory and loss. He lost. The judge said, you haven't proven your case. I sort of forget the details of Abe's original contest.
The issue is a bunch of provisional ballots that weren't properly counted, that should have been, I think it was over 8,000, that if he just had 257 or more of those provisional ballots being counted in his favor, he wins, and he won the election. And the judge waited until the last possible minute to issue a ruling. And basically, the judge sitting there saying, how do I screw Hamada? How do I screw him? I wait. That apparently was the main excuse. It said it's a close call, but I got to screw the outsider. Sorry. There's your typical judge, sadly, in America. And I guess we'll have a written ruling at some point. Hamada, of course, is going to appeal it. It's clear Hamada, in my view, won, and they stole it from him. And so it's like all these ridiculous claims where they're pursuing Trump on having electors and going through the constitutional process that he was entitled to legally contest who won the election. All the media hit pieces all say he was trying to falsely claim that he was elected. You disagree with whether the media, you disagree with whether he won, but he wasn't falsely claiming anything. He believed he won, and the objective facts would support it. No, as Tucker Carlson pointed out to Nikki Haley's embarrassment, Tucker kept hammering. He goes, 81 million. 81 million. Do you think Joe Biden got 81 million votes when Barack Obama couldn't get that many votes? 81 million? Do you really think
population growth? The population has grown since Obama.
There was growth, though, right? In mystical, miraculous ballots that came in on election night or afterwards. So, so Hamada's going to challenge that all the way through the process. The Arizona Democratic illegally elected attorney general is busy trying to figure out ways to prosecute Trump too. That's what's going on in crazy, kooky Arizona. Katie Hobbs has been a complete failure as governor. Kari Lake is still one of the most popular candidates to potentially be vice presidential candidate. Now up there with Byron Donalds and Vivek. as the most popular candidates amongst Trump's base to potentially be vice president. DeSantis is busy sinking. I made a joke comparison. I won't make it again because I need to probably make more time. Tragedy plus time equals comedy is what Woody Allen instructed, so I'll stick with it. But it was a funny meme though. But I have a dark sense of humor. Kari Lake's doing a good job pursuing this case. Make the Arizona Supreme Court make a decision. At least the Arizona Supreme Court should say it's judicially reviewable, even if they don't reinstate her, which is what should be the case, and create a retrial or an election, a runoff or a new election, if you will. Then, if at a minimum establish that courts do in fact have the power to enforce the law governing signature review processes. I hope they at least do that. She's done more work for election integrity than anybody in the last several decades. So credit to Kari Lake for continuing to pursue the case all the way through.
Hamada was attorney general that he was running for, and
he should be. The Arizona voters voted for him, and he was wrongfully denied the office.
Now, before I forget, actually, I consistently forget. Everybody hit the little plus button on Rumble on the bottom, the thumbs up. And if you haven't already joined or subscribe on Rumble. And also, I just put the link in there to come to visit us on Locals after we're done here, because we're going to be done here soon.
Ohio won.
Okay.
Speaking of election reforms.
You're going to have to do this one beginning to end, Robert, and I'll ask you questions as you go.
Yeah, we've had people continually ask about this, and some people emailed some stuff. I have a simple answer on this. Vote no. Now, I understand why there's a yes campaign. The pro-life community is worried that if an abortion amendment is put on the Ohio Constitution, that a majority of voters will vote for something that is less restrictive than is current Ohio law. That is not an excuse to try to change the rules to impose a supermajority requirement and make initiatives harder to obtain. Giving more power to the legislature is not the answer. I'm a big fan of initiatives and direct voting. So I think the 50% rule plus one rule, majority vote rule, actually, not 50%, that the majority vote rule should stay in place is my take. I mean, if you vote yes for Ohio 1, you're going to require future amendments get 60% or more support. And more significantly, you're going to require at least 5% signatures to get past an initiative, which will make initiatives very hard to get through.
But hold on.
And all you're really doing, you're saying, we the people want less power. We want to give more power to the legislature and the governor. Ask yourself if that's a good decision.
You might have to back it up, and you might have the curse of knowledge here. Ohio is proposing an amendment
to its constitution called Ohio 1, up for a vote, I believe, first week of August.
And it's an amendment to the Constitution that would
would require future amendments. I always love these. This amendment can pass by majority, but it says all future amendments have to pass by 60% or more, and or they fail to amend, and they can only get even on the ballot for people to even get a chance to vote on them if we increase the number of signatures they have to get to 5% of the gubernatorial electoral vote, which is going to make it very difficult to get in, or very expensive. The only initiatives that will get through are big corporate, big money-backed initiatives. That and by the way, that won't prevent the abortion one from being presented on the ballot. So the pro-life community is mistaken on that. But they think it's easier for them to get 41% of the vote than 51% of the vote. Honestly, that should tell the pro-life community in Ohio that you need to do a better job persuading people, not let's rig the rules. So as long as we control the legislature or the governor's branch, we can keep our policies in place, even if we know 59% of our fellow citizens don't agree with us.
All right. And there's going to be another quick one before we get to the good ones, which is Steve Bannon and Elon Musk. Oh, my goodness. You're going to tell me. I don't know how you think about the Twitter lawyer retainer agreement change at the eve of the closing, but I think I know where you're going to go with it. Mississippi, Robert, I'm not sure I fully understand this one. I think I understand the dynamics, but not necessarily. There's a predominantly 70% black district in Mississippi where they've elected black judges, black law enforcement. And the allegation is that the funds or the financing of these aspects of justice and law enforcement are determined by a part of government that is not in the district that elected these black judges, black officers, and that because of racism, they're systematically deciding to underfund this particular district for law enforcement, for judicial resources? Is that sort of the gist of this Mississippi case?
Yeah. So it's and the additional component is that it's Hinds County, Jackson, Mississippi. I always forget whether Johnny Cash in his song "Going to Jackson." I think he's talking about Jackson, Tennessee, not Jackson, Mississippi. But it's always possible he's talking about Jackson, Mississippi. Great song with him and his wife that they sing together, June Carter Cash, from the great Carter family of East Tennessee and elsewhere. Great folk singing tradition that blended into country music. And so what's been happening is Hinds County is 70% black in terms of voting population. They've been voting in black judges, black prosecutors, black police. Now, what else is Jackson, Mississippi? It's the state capital. So the politicians in the state capital are unhappy about being governed by a black Democratic majority. So they've been doing two things. They've been squeezing the funds available to the entire criminal justice process, not giving them new judges, not giving them other means of remedy and relief, having their criminal dockets being backlogged, et cetera. But their second new scheme was to create a capital improvement district that was going to say, well, really, this is all part of the capital, and we're going to include all the suburbs over here, and we're going to create a 70% white district, and now this is who's going to govern the area around the capital. That's now going to be overextended into basically all the white areas of Hinds County and outside Hinds County, and especially the capital. And now we're going to give all that power to new judges. We're going to give that power to new cops. I'm not in favor of these kind of ideas in general. I mean, it's like Nancy Pelosi's little Capitol Police. Let's extend it to everywhere we could claim jurisdiction. And that's going to be the whole country ultimately, because we have to protect members of Congress who represent the entire country, right? Similar kind of scheme. And the NAACP has sued. The Biden administration has intervened on behalf of the NAACP on the grounds it violates the 14th Amendment because it's intended to harm the black community in Hinds County and preclude them from exercising the political power to which they are lawfully entitled to under Mississippi law. And so I think they're right. I'm not in favor of what Mississippi is trying to do. Now, this does reflect a broader concern, which is so many state capitals are in jurisdictions where the state is conservative and the capital is liberal. I think that is an issue for lawsuits, for venue, and things like that. And I think we should re-examine that. It's a problem with the District of Columbia on a national level. It's a problem with in all of these states. Including in Florida with Tallahassee, Georgia with Fulton County with Atlanta, here in Mississippi with Jackson. So they should just move the state capital, in my view, in many of these cases, or at least change the venue provisions so that you don't have all liberal juries deciding issues of state law about, against the conservatives. But I think it appears they were just, to try to interfere with local policing, local judges. That is, I have a problem with, and the racial history of Mississippi needs no, repetition. My brother and I once saw Mississippi Burning. We went to a movie theater. It was the cheap movie theater, and we didn't calculate the audience, so we showed up and we were the only white guys in the entire audience. And I remember just, in case, people got, this was very dramatic. What's in there? And I was like, I'm good white guy, good white guy. Good honky.
Just so you didn't show up in a Dukes of Hazzard card, Robert.
Don't let me. That's no bueno. Everybody was cool as things turned out, but I'll never forget that. I also once walked into School Days, the DAZE, one of the early, and I walked into it by accident. I was trying to go into another movie theater, and I go in, I sit down like in the middle, because I like those middle seats, we get the whole view. And then I realized, I'm in the wrong movie. And then I realized it's a whole black audience. I'm like, I'm going to look like an idiot if I get up and walk out. They're going to think, look at that guy. I was like, I'm just going to have to sit here and watch it. That's what I did.
It's like, it reminds me of that scene in Road Trip where they go to the fraternity and they're sitting there. It's like, you realize this is an all black fraternity. And the other guy's like, I don't see things like that. A movie that has aged particularly well. Okay, very fascinating. Now, Robert, we're going to get to lawyers are bad people. I don't know enough about the Steve Bannon underlying part of the case. Steve Bannon racked up allegedly $850,000 in legal fees. I suspect this was in the context of the contempt of Congress case. Ran up a bill of $850,000, or that is to say, his lawyers charged him $850,000. Apparently, according to the judge's ruling, he didn't contest it or object to it in time. Paid $380,000, and they sued. Judge says, no, you got to pay it. You didn't object to the billing at the time, and it was reasonable legal services. So now he's got to pay close to $500,000. He's got a new law firm. I presume he's paying them, who say they're going to appeal the decision because it's clearly wrong. I mean, you have the same mechanisms in the States that you have in Quebec, where if you get an invoice, you have a certain period of time within which you can contest it, and there's a process set up. But if you don't, and you sit there and you let them accumulate, and then, whoa, you realize they're up to $800,000, you don't want to pay it, too late. So, so sad. I don't know any details that above and beyond that. Does Steve Bannon have any legitimate excuse here? Is there outrageous like after billing, or is this just Bannon not paying attention to the legal fees as they're coming in?
The two major problems with the court's decision, where the judge issued partial summary judgment, New York State court proceeding without any discovery being allowed, is it's a complete misapplication of the account stated doctrine in America. So the account stated claim is that when you have an account, the other party accepts that they have that account, and that the amount stated has been accepted or agreed to as being due and owing by either express language or by implication. The implication provisions have been limited. It's supposed to be a recurring creditor-debtor relationship. So this is supposed to be your bank statement. This is supposed to be a relationship between you send me something, I review it, check, come back. It is not supposed to apply to every other contract in America. It should not be used for doctors. It should not be used for lawyers. It should not be used for accountants, but they misuse it and abuse it. And of course, judges love to help lawyers rack up fees if they're on the political right side of the equation, or if the defendant's on the wrong political side of the equation. And they greenlight things they're not supposed to. So in an account stated case, you're supposed to prove as a plaintiff undisputed liability. It's basically account stated supposed to be equal to a settlement agreement. And the only time that you getting an invoice and not objecting to it constitutes a settlement agreement is when there is a undisputed pattern, custom, and practice of a debtor-creditor relationship like a bank statement. So you get a bank statement and something in there is taken out that shouldn't have been, and you don't call the bank on it. There you're stuck because you're part of it's a recurrent debtor-creditor relationship. That is not the case with a lawyer and client. It's not the case with a doctor and patient. Not the case with an accountant and client. And these misuse and abuse of account-stated doctrines, other courts now New York is horrible. New York comes up with every excuse in the world to help lawyers. They still have retention file doctrines where you can continue to hold a file, including of the client's own information, from a new lawyer or from the client, unless they pay the lawyer's demand, a financial demand. It's hijacking, extortion. It's stolen property is what it really is. Almost every other court in America has rejected it. But New York courts are so incorrigibly corrupt and so in the pockets of lawyers that they make ridiculous rulings in favor of lawyers, particularly if they're politically protected. So Bannon has robust appellate rights, appeal issues present. I don't know how well his trial counsel raised these issues. The trial court would make it sound like it was poorly presented. You never know whether that's true or not. But he should have been allowed to challenge the underlying liability. Second, and what's the underlying liability? In this context, ethically, as we'll get into the Musk case, you as a lawyer have to prove that your fees are ethically charged, consistent to your fiduciary obligation, and reasonably incurred, and in the quantum merit context, conferred real value upon your client. The last reason is why I've never been sued on a legal fee dispute ever. Because I always tell them, occasionally I'll get a client that will want to weasel out of something. And, you don't always get the best clients in the world. I've had above average clients, but a couple, scheme through the process that are always trying to figure out a way to save an extra buck. And I remind them, okay, I was like, look, we'll just waive the contract provision and we'll go and do quantum merit. Let me explain to you all the value I conferred on you. and how the court will see it. And like, well, but you're going to owe me money. I'm not going to owe you a refund. You're going to owe me money by the time that analysis is done, because that's pretty universal. But that's what they're supposed to prove. They didn't prove any of those things. They didn't prove their fees were reasonable. They didn't prove that they completely honored their ethical and fiduciary obligations. They didn't prove that there was any of what value they provided to Bannon. It's not obvious they provided any value, quite frankly, given the outcome of a lot of these cases. But for being salvaged and saved by a pardon, the rest of the cases, they failed to achieve any benefit on that I could witness. There were conflict of interest issues because there were going to be witnesses in some of the proceedings. There are legal malpractice issues because it appears they gave him bad advice. So he can also challenge them like any settlement agreement you can challenge on mistake, mutual mistake, on fraud, on all of those other grounds. So the court just assumed that liability couldn't be contested because this was an account stated case when it's not an account stated case. They didn't have a recurrent creditor-debtor relationship. That's not the nature here. My favorite part of the decision was the judge said, quote, he doesn't dispute that he received the documents, and then quotes him saying, I never personally received the documents. And the judge is like, well, never personally received doesn't mean never received. In what world is that?
But
what
it was
a ludicrous ruling.
It was for summary judgment. Had Bannon, or was he able to rely on any documents in defense, or was it just basically
it was pure a summary judgment where he presented no discovery was allowed, and his basic affidavit was ignored. The affidavit saying, look, I didn't receive this. I didn't approve this.
Well,
I never had time to object because I never personally received it. And the judge was like, well, you didn't say you didn't receive it. You said didn't personally. What is that? That's preposterous. So it is a preposterous ruling. I just don't know how good his lawyers are. I don't think these lawyers that overbilled him were any good. But to be honest, this is part of a Bannon recurrent issue of bad personnel decisions. So Milo is a guy he shouldn't have promoted. He was early, even before the election, promoting some people connected to Dominion that were nuts. He's right now promoting. He's been promoting for years now. Naomi Wolf. Naomi Wolf is out there pretending that she's Brooke Jackson, and that she's going to bring one of the first False Claims Act claims concerning Fiverr. How she makes this stuff up is beyond me. I saw her do it in other contexts. She's going to be the first one to bring FOIA challenges after we've been bringing, after those FOIA suits have been brought. She was the first one to challenge their authority of the FDA to do this, while our lawsuit for Robert Kennedy and CHD was already pending, or with Robert Kennedy was already pending. So, he does this all the time. He have about 2/3, well, I'll say 50-50. Half the time you meet really interesting people that Bannon promotes, and half the time they're idiots. And now you see why he was not a good advisor about personnel. Yeah, Trump Sessions will make a great attorney general. Worst possible place to put Sessions. God bless his soul, but hopefully all of these problems will wake him up that he needs to get a little bit better, just like his former boss, with who he hires for staff.
Well, and now I'm thinking which I think I know which 50-50 I go on, because Bannon hasn't promoted me, but I've been on the show back in the trucker convoy a lot, and I know he likes me. But and Naomi,
I like Steve. I think he's a brilliant architect, brilliant idea, but he promotes some the people he shouldn't promote. Number one, number two, quit hiring bad lawyers, and you won't get stuck with big fees.
$800,000 for a conviction, and
yeah.
Not to be judgmental.
And I know they weren't doing good work on the federal case, because I consulted with other co-defendants in that case. Was never their lawyer, but there was basic stuff his lawyers weren't doing that should have been done. And we talked about it at the time. Like, there was no reason to believe these lawyers were. He just kept hiring these conventional guys. It's like, why do you keep hiring? I mean, But this is a guy who got taken in by Mueller. Again, a Bannon, brilliant guy, brilliant architect, brilliant ideas, great advocate. This is an area of weakness that he happens to share with his former boss named President Trump that really could benefit from upgrading.
And I'm going to say this: it's always easy for other people to criticize the work of others, or especially the contractors that came before them. The sticker shock when I saw the amount, when they said that he had to pay $500,000 above and beyond the $380.
What's the value? If I would be embarrassed to ever sue a client if I didn't achieve anything of value for that client. Now, to be frank, that's never happened to me. But, I've always, even in cases where we don't get the outcome we want, I achieve something. I get something better than the average schmuck. But to sue somebody for $500,000 after delivering absolutely nothing of benefit? You got to be kidding me.
I'm clipping that, Robert. Wonderful. All right, now speaking of asking for something for nothing, Robert. So I don't know the names of the law firm. You'll mention the names, but in the context of the closing transaction, Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter, you have law firms that organize the transaction, the merger, the closing documents, the due diligence, yada yada yada. This law firm, our community pointed out, or someone pointed out, that this law firm is known for making what do they call them? Not bonus payments, but performance bonuses. Like, do a big deal, you get a percentage of the deal. Bottom line, this law firm was working and billing in the orders of the millions. Like, they had billed Twitter $18 million for this due diligence merger acquisition with Elon Musk. On the eve, and I might be getting some of the timeline mixed up, but I don't think I am, because I think the timeline goes down to hours. They, through Vijay God, who I'm not naming to be mean, just she's named in the lawsuit, they modify their retainer agreement, their legal contract agreement between Twitter and this law firm, to say, we're going to pay you $90 million. It includes the $18 million that you've already billed for this transaction. And we're going to do this on the eve of the closing. And we're going to rush the wire out like within hours before the closing, or hours before Vijay God was ultimately fired from Twitter. $90 million. Now, it's X Corporation, Elon's company, that's suing. Now I'm blanking out. He's suing the law firm, or is he suing the law firm? Is he suing Twitter? No, hold on. He's suing geez Louise, he's suing the law firm, correct?
Yeah.
Just total brain fart for a second. I love the term he was using. I forget, it was a lame duck fiduciary, but basically accusing the law firm of bilking the company that he's going to acquire of a massively unwarranted legal fee. And it doesn't harm anybody except for Elon Musk. And you have these saboteurs, or executives who are supposed to have a fiduciary obligation to the company, agreeing to modify the retainer agreement to just pay out $90 million, knowing it comes out of Twitter, which is going to be bought by Elon as of midnight. And he's going to be $90 million poor, and this law firm's going to be $90 million richer. Robert, is this a legitimate practice?
It's Wachtell, one of the most prominent law firms in America. It tells you how big corporate firms really operate. I mean, they're issuing invoices with like blank billing, with what's called block billing, where it's like 10 hours, did work. That's all it said. They had an hourly billing agreement. How you run up 18 million in hourly billing in a month or two is by itself preposterous. This wasn't that complicated or complex of a case. 18 million in a month or two? What a crock. It's what they're used to. And what it is, and Twitter had an agreement with Musk that a bunch of last minute expenses would not be approved without his approval. And they just decided, what it was is the corporate staff there, the general counsel, the lady you mentioned is the one that was on Joe Rogan, that tried with Tim Pool, that with Jack Dorsey, that tried to lie and cover up all the Twitter censorship. Clear, opposed hated having to sell this to Musk. And they just decide, when you sell an asset to another person, you don't get to raid the asset right before you leave.
Oh, but it wasn't for her benefit. Happened. It wasn't for her benefit, Robert. It was just for legal services. It was a contract in the ordinary course of business.
For pals. This is how this system works. How can you raid the corporate treasury for your corporate legal law firm pals that will then reward you probably down the road? This was $90 million for nothing of benefit that I could see, that was not part of the original agreement even.
Oh, no. I think what they had a benefit is $90 million to hide from Elon the liability that he's purchasing in Twitter. Hide the FBI, the intermingling, hide all of the backdoor entrance stuff. It's crazy. I was just looking up,
the Wire posted literally like an hour before he was able to fire these people. So that's how preposterous it was. But credit to him for suing on unjust enrichment, breach of fiduciary duty, aiding and abetting the board members and other executives, breach of their fiduciary duty. What's interesting, because he's saying it's an unreasonable fee, it's a contingency fee that wasn't properly agreed to under the California ethical rules applicable under the Twitter contract. And now what's interesting is he's interpreting the generic unfair competition fraud, consumer fraud statute. and the fiduciary duty provisions to incorporate the California ethical rules. That will be the most interesting part of the case to watch. If you breach an ethical duty, have you breached a fiduciary duty? If you've breached an ethical duty, have you been unjustly enriched? If you've breached an ethical duty, have you also committed some form of consumer fraud or unfair competition? So all of that will be interesting to see, because those are kind of novel theories that are trying to establish new law. So we'll see how that develops. But I think on the face of it, Wachtell is your classic corrupt corporate firm that tried to rob from Elon Musk on the eve of Elon Musk coming into power. And Elon Musk is having none of it and going back at him for it.
I mean, do they have the money? They'll have the money. It's not like they won't.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is a law firm that I think makes like, what was it, almost $1 billion a year, something like that. It's a ridiculous amount.
Not bad. Now, before we go over we're going over to locals now. So everybody, you got the link in there. And there is only one way to end this episode on Rumble because of the gratuitous use of the word duty coming out of Robert. We're going to end it with this, people.
Duty.
It will never get old.
Diarrhea.
I've never-
Hey, Lois.
What?
Diarrhea.
Okay, it's classic. It's classic. Family Guy, Once Upon a Time, was the funniest show ever. I don't know if it's still funny. All right, Robert. So we're taking this party over to locals. We're going to get to the $5 and more locals tips.
And
we got a couple of bonus episodes.
The Microsoft antitrust case concerning Call of Duty, Bank of America and Walmart get caught cheating their customers, and the TikTok Texas case and whether it violates the First Amendment.
I'm not playing the duty again, but I'm saying everyone come on over to locals, and the party shall continue there. I'm going to go and end this. So I'm going to continue talking as I go into the live streams, and it says end on Rumble. See you all on locals in 5, 4. Enjoy the week, people. Robert, what's your schedule for this week? Do you have anything coming up?
No.
Okay. I will be on the road, but I'll be doing lives nonetheless, and a couple of good guests coming up this week. So stay tuned. Ending on Rumble now. Okay. Let me refresh here and make sure that we are only on locals. Hold on. And come on now. What's going on here? End live stream. Okay. Are you sure you want to end it? Yes. Okay. So now it looks like it's ended on Rumble and we're good on locals. Play it, Viva. Yeah. Duty. Okay. Robert, do you want to do the bonus?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's do one. No, you do them all. You're getting screwed by credit card companies. They get a slap on the wrist fine. Okay. Go for it.
So the Microsoft monopoly case is a FTC brought a action under the Clayton Act, Federal Trade Commission, that Microsoft buying up Activision and thereby buying up Call of Duty, they were going to use it to put it on Xbox exclusively, and that would create an anti-competitive effect. And the Clayton Act prohibits any merger or acquisition that has an anti-competitive effect, a substantially anti-competitive effect or monopolistic aspect to any of the market space. The way Microsoft got out of this, I think there's aspects of the judge's ruling about how somehow vertical integration is good and horizontal integration is bad. I don't quite agree with that assumption about the meaning of antitrust laws, but this is where I'm not. People think I'm a fan of Justice of Bork, who was denied the Supreme Court. I'm generally not. One of the areas I disagree with him on is antitrust laws, amongst many areas where I disagree with him, frankly. I don't think it was, the kind of great savior that conservatives thought he did. And not if you care about civil rights, civil liberties, or antitrust action. If you care about freedom or free markets, Bork was no bueno. But I disagree with that aspect of her legal ruling. But the real reason why Microsoft got off is Microsoft publicly committed to not using the purchase of Call of Duty to exclude Call of Duty from competitive platforms. And so once they did that, then it no longer had an anti-competitive effect, their purchase. So that's really the real reason they won, even though there's some language in the decision that Matt Stoller and others were unhappy with, justifiably, I think. The Bank of America, $250 million fine. What were they doing? They were systematically double dipping on fees on guess which accounts? The ones they had insufficient funds. In other words, they were targeting the most vulnerable, poor, working class people who get stuck with overdraft fees on their bank accounts. It just happens because they live paycheck to paycheck. And they were double dipping their little $35 fee, often charging it 2, 3, 4, 5 times. to screw them over. That isn't all they were doing. They were busy opening credit cards in people's accounts without the people ever applying for those credit cards.
I had a fight with a credit card company at one point. It was when I was younger, and in the past, where they unilaterally increased my credit card limit because they deemed an attempt to buy something beyond the limit or to surpass the limit was a deemed request to increase the limit. I was like, no, the limit is so that I don't go over the credit card limit, not so that you can authorize, without me asking, an increase so that I can incur more debt than I can actually, satisfy. This is exactly what they're doing here. They're like, oh, it's what in my case, they actually said it's a, what's it called when they do something nice for you without you having to ask? It's a courtesy. It's like, it's not a courtesy. You're incurring liability for me that I don't want. Sorry. So they're doing something similar here. They're opening accounts unrequested, so they can actually then screw you twice. It's
all they do is pay, $250 million and keep going on. Classic. I mean, these are people that should be criminally prosecuted. And then Walmart got caught, and people probably should really double check this in the future. I'll be honest with you, I hadn't even thought to look at this. What Walmart was doing was they were constantly changing what they wanted the price to be for an item. And so they would tell the associates at the registers on a regular basis, here's what we actually want to charge. But they weren't updating it at the shelf. So what was happening is you're like, oh, $1.99, that's a great deal. I'll grab that. And you usually get 100 items, right? Or however many, 15, 20, 25. You're at Walmart, you usually get a bunch. And you probably didn't notice they actually upcharged you once it went. It's something you may not have even would have bought had you known its real price when it went through the register, because not enough people were cross-checking it with their receipt. And they got caught doing it systematically by the old measures in exchange, the old weighting division of Colorado caught them doing it. You got to assume they were doing it nationwide and worldwide, because this appears to have been systematic. And Walmart was like, that was an accident.
It was
We're
an
sorry about that.
algorithmic glitch.
Yeah. We just forgot to make sure the labels were updated. So they agreed, we won't do that anymore. We promised to fix that. No major problems, but pay attention to that next time you're at a grocery store or anyone else. The item is what it was on the shelf.
Oh no, it drives me nuts when I go get my unhealthy habit, not my Field of Greens drink. When I get the Red Bulls, it's like it's 2 for $4, whatever. And then half the time they bill you, they charge you for $3 for the can, and then you fit stereotypes and you say, "Excuse me, I don't want it for free, even though under consumer protection law I can get it for free in Quebec. Just charge me what it says on the damn thing." I have a theory, Robert. Systems have gotten too big to succeed now. Like, things are not working properly. Credit card companies are systematically broken. What did I just say? Credit cards, cell phone, computers, apps, phones. Things have gotten too big not to fail to operate correctly. Although some people would say it's absolutely by design, so they can just, what percentage of these big businesses, banks, etc., rely on this type of accidental overcharging as a source of revenue? I
mean, all of them been caught. I mean, they've been caught multiple. They got caught years ago overcharging on foreign exchange rates, doing a bogus foreign exchange rate to strip people. They're always figuring out different ways to steal from you. It's who they are. Then the last bonus case tonight, before we get to the tip questions, TikTok. Texas governor banned it.
So, Robert, they're contesting the ban. They're saying it's a ban on universities, I think, who are public employees. Yep. I can see the lawsuit succeeding and this ban being overturned, because I don't understand what the rationale, what the public emergency is for banning it. It looks like a nice political move, but the necessity I don't see, but maybe I'm not understanding it properly.
Yeah, it's because TikTok is owned by a U.S. company that is in turn owned by a Chinese company that is in turn owned by the Chinese government. And that's an understandable concern for the people of Texas to have. That does not mean you can completely ban a platform that is used for speech purposes. I'm not comfortable with that idea. And what they did here is the governor just issued a ban that now then they passed, the legislature passed a bill to do so, which basically made it so that if you were a state employee at all, you couldn't even use it on your private devices if you use those devices to access a state funded network, for example. So basically, if you're a university professor, the point was you can't research with it, you can't teach with it, You can't publish anything concerning it. You can't discuss it. You can't use it to discuss your own items. And that they sort of narrowly focused on a clear First Amendment violation in all probability. Appears to me they have standing. It's a group that represents a faculty member that's directly discriminated against by this. And I'm not I understand the concerns with TikTok being owned by China. I'm not in favor of these kind of bans on platforms because they will inevitably be misused and abused to prohibit speech for targeted groups.
If that's the rationale, it's an app that's owned by China. There's a ton of crap that you buy coming out of China that's important stuff like microchips and all this other stuff, which if that's the concern, there's no limit to where it's going to be expanded. And I wouldn't mind that as a matter of policy.
A spy technique. Under the guise of regulating China, one of their enforcement mechanisms was to make sure everybody's phone didn't have this app on it. And the only way to do that was to put tracking on it to see what apps and other information. So it seemed to me like another government scheme, even though it was Governor Abbott, who I otherwise like, to find a new excuse to surveil and spy on us.
Just upload the government app so they can make sure you don't have any bad apps on your phone.
Exactly.
All right, let's get to the tips here, Robert. We got Melmat. Melmat. $5 tip. Please address issue 1 in Ohio. We need to understand both sides. I heard it was brought because of abortion rights. Thank you. I think you covered it. I think you steelman.
Yeah, we did.
What I mean to say is, I think you sufficiently steelman both sides. It wasn't just a partisan interpretation.
Serena, I recommend for everybody out there, vote no.
Serena Reppins, $5 tip says, Barnes, do you follow Professor St. Ange? I think his tweet is spot on. Please comment.
Yeah, I think I do. I think he follows me too.
U.S. is helping China lure countries off the dollar. Well, we've seen the expansion of BRICS now, so that's not a question.
There's no practical way for that to happen because people need to know that the euro dollar. I recommend Jeff Snyder, George Gammon. Jeff Snyder really breaks this down. The world's financial system isn't controlled by any central bank. It's controlled by a cartel of international banks, and the euro dollar, a synthetic dollar system, which means a dollar outside the United States, is what really runs things, and it's too dominant for any country to replace. China's not going to replace the U.S. dollar anytime soon, nor is any of the BRIC stuff going to work. It's not going to work for decades because of what. But people need to know the euro dollar system to understand why.
We got flowers for you, Robert. Thoughts and suggestions after California district judge rules schools can withhold gender and pronoun changes from parents.
Yeah, we'll include that next week.
Entry required. DSLR, my thumbnail guy lookalike. Question Viva and Barnes. I read the Substacks. I watch the war videos. It sickens me. Ukraine should be farming and feeding the world and not in this proxy tail wags the dog war. I want this war to stop now. How can we stop this war prior to the 2024 election?
Well, Trump's doing everything he can, and Robert Kennedy's doing everything he can to help create that reality. But there's no evidence that President Biden cares.
I know.
Sadly, 2/3 of Republicans in the House don't either.
What did Tom Cotton?
Robert, 1/3 of Republicans, but it's still 2/3 of Republicans are still for this war, like most of the Republican candidates in Iowa were.
Well, Tom Cotton comes up with something. I thought
he's been a war whore from the get-go. He was a big Maidan coup backer, 2014. Guess who his big co-signer was from the House of Representatives back then?
I'm trying to think and look smart, but I'm going to only make a fool of myself, so I'll remain quiet. Who, Robert?
A first-term congressman from Florida, Ron DeSantis.
I think there's no calming down of this proxy war until 2024. I have a bad feeling between Trudeau and Biden. Those two idiots want to distract as much as they can from domestic failure, so they're going to exacerbate this as much as they can. It's the cynical side of me.
In between Biden trying to eat young children.
Oh God, that was. I'm not even giving that visual.
You know how kids have a great instinct?
Yeah.
Every time they're around Biden, they're like, they're pulling their back of their head.
Oh God! And then the mother,
like, Mommy, get me the heck away from this freak.
The mother was selfie recording.
Oh, yeah, she's like,
I got the evidence.
And the kid's like, please God.
Doc No sent a $5 tip. It says, thoughts on Twitter paying content creators. Game changer. You guys posting to Twitter more now. I talked about it last week. My concern is that it's going to incentivize the wrong type of content on Twitter, but internet is meant for.
It's almost intended to create. It would create more interaction on Twitter, but more negative interaction and stuff like that, as far as I could tell. So I think he could do better at how he monetizes content on Twitter.
Also, maybe just clarify, even for those who receive money, what's the formula here? Is it like AdSense revenue? At least it's like CPM, and you can figure it out. This was just like willy-nilly, not complaining. transparency for everybody who has concerns. How does it work and how's it going to work on a going forward basis? Yael Rivka says this is a pun worthy of a tip. And it's Loch Chaim. Loch Chaim, let me see here. Loch Chaim kosher single malt. How can single malt not be kosher? And then it says save $3. Loch Chaim. Loch Chaim. Well, anyways, I like that. Now you made me want to have a drink. Okay, great. Now I have to wait until we're done here. We got Ag Biochemist, $5 tip. Hi, Viva and Robert and chat. On Friday, I passed my PhD defense in biochemistry at Kansas State. This is where I'd like to have a L'chaim right now and say, cheers, Ag Biochemist. That's amazing. I was just
that's impressive. That is tough. That is a tough field. I mean, the Professor Lowry mentioned, the biochemistry and all these tough categories, and he added analytic philosophy. So I got to tell my brother about that because he'll be all pumped that Professor Lowry considers analytic philosophy just as difficult as biochemistry.
And I was just listening to Rogan, and the one guy was a scientific philosopher. He was a philosophy of science. I forget his name. And then I got taken into another guy named David Buss, and I'm listening to these scientists who it borders on philosophy. It's amazing. But one of them said when he passed his thesis, so Stephen Hawking's passed his thesis, and they said, great theory, now go find the math. Amazing stuff by Ag Biochemist. Congratulations. Roger G, $10 says, my American son working for Microsoft in Montreal was just fired for speech at a non-work function. They have given him until Thursday to sign termination papers. Can you please recommend a Montreal lawyer that can help? And do you know how this will affect his work visa? Okay. Do I say, I'm going to put the name, nobody's going to, this is publicity. I have a few people that I always refer the stuff to that I could no longer take. Eric Schwecke, Choueke, and David Etedgi, Ettedgui. Solo-ish, smaller guys, so they're not working at the big firms. They won't get conflicted out. Young and full of energy and smart guys. And honest as far as lawyers go. So that's it, Roger. I'll screen grab this and see if it just send you you'll get their info. There's only one Schwecke. There's actually Eric Schwecke, David Etedgi. Those would be my two, public free advertising if they wanted it for me. Pete to base. That's a $1 tip. I'm reading it anyhow. 500. I don't know what that means. We got USA Now, $5, $5.50 tip. Oblividan supporter, $1. Mr. Barnes, do you think we will ever find out how many feds involved in January 6th? We got to that one. Ginger Ninja, $5 tip. Retransing kids. Barnes is concerned about parents' medical rights, and I share the concern. But transing kids is healthcare just as much as maids, medical assistants in dying. It's not. It goes against the Hippocratic Oath. If it is illegally made to be non-medical for that reason, banning it wouldn't have the same dangerous precedent against parental rights. It must be banned, Robert.
Unfortunately, it would have the same dangerous precedent because what stops them from saying a range of things are not medical care? If the question is who has the power to declare something
medical care.
And if you give that to the state, then you give that to the state. And if you cede it to the state, game over.
I don't mind something being declared abuse or non-medical care after thorough public debate, and then that's pass it by legislation.
But I would only then be for enforceability through jury trials, and where people could sue because they considered malpractice. When you start saying that you're going to override parents, kids, and doctors, and the state has the unilateral capacity to do that, you open up a perilous path for individual rights and medical and bodily autonomy.
Yeah, well, but to quote Robert Sowell, Thomas Sowell, I mean, there's no right or wrong. There's trade-offs. So there's going to be trade-offs.
Oh, yeah, no question. But I'm just not willing to take that trade-off, giving the state that power.
Susie Green, $5. I don't know why this one's pissing so many people off, Morgan. My understanding is that parents have to be here legally, not citizens. Don's wife, $7 tip.
Because of the immigration issue, and people are bothered by anchor baby phenomenon. I understand that concern. But that is, and that's an argument for statutory change on some of the benefits that come from having a relative that's an immigrant. But it's not, if you otherwise change the Constitution, don't try to rewrite the Constitution.
Don's wife, why did Tucker let Pence shut down his question about religious leaders being persecuted in Ukraine when Tucker interviewed Pence yesterday at the Family Leadership Summit in Des Moines, Iowa?
He was asking a bunch of questions, and he just let Pence answer the way he wanted.
Pence
he didn't usually interrupt or challenge him.
This is a $1 tip. Born in Germany to American citizen, German citizen. Could I be president? Gina 193.
Essentially, yes. And there's a lot of language by that in Supreme Court decisions, scholarly analyses, and elsewhere.
You're getting in trouble here, Robert. Logan W. Murphy. Logan _W Murphy, $5. Robert, you make a distinction for foreign army occupying soil, but what is the meaningful distinction between an occupying army and illegal immigrants?
The
emergency-
occupying army is not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, whereas an illegal immigrant is.
Although they would be, Robert, if they get arrested and detained and
Well,
tried.
I mean, the assumption with an occupying army is that they are the only authority and jurisdiction at that time in that place.
Okay.
So if they are just invaders, not an occupying army, then they would be subject to the jurisdiction. So unless you want to also claim that any illegal immigrant cannot be arrested or detained in America or deported, because that's what the courts don't have personal jurisdiction over them. I mean, people haven't thought this through as to what this would actually mean.
Susie Green, so illegal subject to U.S. jurisdiction are citizens and can vote. Also, can you cite cases where the court clarified that all child born here are citizens?
There's many. I'll
Well,
probably include it in a Barnes brief
I
to
thought
remind
so.
people of just how detailed this analysis is. Goes back to Blackstone, goes back to the founders, goes back to cases dating to 1844, 1876, 1890s, 1920s, 1950s. It's come up in a wide range of contexts.
All right. Now, Professor Tom, let me just make sure I didn't skip one. Oh, my goodness, I did. Okay. I'm going to read through this. Professor Tom, $5. Redefining securities. If the government prevails in their redefinition efforts, does that mean that welfare can be ended because single moms having kids is an investment for future government and child support payments? Okay, that's funny. Dapper Dave, it's a $1 tip. I started reading. Okay. Anyone who has a problem with Jack Smith tweets, he clearly shows his biases in those tweets. Can it be part?
Some of the. I mean, I don't know if I haven't read any actual tweets that were definitely his, but but Jack Smith is clearly overtly and openly political.
No, but
I did enjoy Trump's humor. He's like, man, you got to deal with the cocaine in the White House, but they should probably investigate Jack Smith. He seems like a crackhead to me.
Is it Jack Smith? Jack E. Smith? That can't be the right. I thought it was.
I don't know I didn't know he had a Twitter account. So I don't know anything about that.
And I got confused.
I know his wife's a political activist. I mean, he's been a political activist his whole life. Nobody has any doubts about who he is.
Professor Tom, if a jury can see classified documents, but the jury members don't have to be cleared, doesn't that mean that the court is declassifying documents, the very act that the government says Trump didn't have the power to perform?
It's one of the many problems with the nature of the case and the problems with classifications in general.
Webster, 1994, $20 tip says, do you think Kennedy will win the nominations?
You can go to sportspicks.locals.com. That's where I put up my Barnes betting report for the political betting markets to see what that is. Those who have already taken the bets there have already had at least a 4-fold return, up to a 10-fold return betting on Kennedy so far. That's how well he's already done in the market.
I'm an idiot. I said I was going to do it. I didn't do it. Anyways, but I'm better off not doing it because whenever I bet on somebody, like I go to UFC and I bet on a guy, they lose. So I'm not. We got TJ2 Mag, $5. Could Ray Epps' lawsuit be used for discovery to prove him a Fed? Also, given the Biden's place in Delaware, is the fix in as with the laptop, etc.? Yeah, we covered that. I mean, the fix seems to be Fox. Ooh, Fox the fix. I'm going to go tweet that out. Professor Tom, the term gerrymandy is a portmanteau of a salamander and Elbridge Gerry. Vice President of the United States at the time of his death, as governor of Massachusetts, 1812, signed a bill that created a partisan district in the Boston area that was compared to the shape of the mythological salamander. Thank you very much. We got Fancy or P-Hancy or it's fancy. A $5 tip. Barnes, you got Vivek idea wrong on citizenship. He said born in USA from parents who are legally present in the USA. We have talked about this to death. Dave MN, who I think is Dave in Minnesota. Viva. Did you watch Trudeau in town hall where lady has $1,000 hydro bill? Barnes, I know no one but Trump for you, but Vivek is a legit candidate. I think we like him. Oh, no, but the $1,000 hydro bill. They sent us the summer price reduction rebate. Just like here's money back to offset the increased costs of our policy. It's wonderful idiocy. Avacan, $5 says, would this antitrust with Activision and Call of Duty kill exclusivity on consoles? It happens to be a marketing tool to sell gaming consoles. Robert, I know.
In essence, the consoles was part of the market that they evaluated. And because they're going to keep Call of Duty available on Sony and other consoles, that's how they got out of the challenge. Had they tried to make it exclusive to the Xbox, what Microsoft owns, which was the original allegation, the FTC, then I think Microsoft would have lost the case.
We got John Ritchie, $5. I follow Tiffany Jones, 316, who I believe is Ray Epps' daughter and frequently testifies what a bad man he is. Irregardless, why can't wealthy traditionalists hire a world-class private investigatory firm to get to the bottom of Ray Epps, and for that matter, the Patriot Front and its so-called adherents? Bayou Nola, $5. How can we stop Biden from sending 3,000 of our soldiers to Ukraine? You can't. I don't know. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, nothing legally, no.
Amadon, $5 tip. NRC has regulations about using programs like TikTok if you work at the NRC regulated facility, nuclear power plant. Little Rock attorney.
Yeah, for national security reasons, they do have more control over what they can do.
All right. Little Rock attorney is Little Rock. Have a great night, guys. Go back to, I have to work. Godspeed. God bless, Little Rock. RJ, Iowa. A $5 tip. Will landlords ever hope to get money from COVID where tenants were protected from paying rent under like Third and Fourth Amendment?
They would have to bring it as a takings claim, and that will be uphill, but there are some people that are doing that.
We got thanks. Appreciate all you share from Travelin1. $5 tip from Afghan Chuck. You guys totally missed the issue with TikTok. Not info they get, but the manipulation of propaganda our kids get.
And I understand that, but
Yeah,
that isn't grounds to prohibit people from using your access.
No, nobody's defending TikTok. It's a social cancer. I mean,
that's why we oppose. That's why I'm for the Missouri suit against Biden. Is that in the name of misinformation, propaganda is not justification for the government to restrict access.
And we got RJ Iowa, $5 tip. Wouldn't just giving an adult who transitioned as a child be able to sue those who did it and supported it?
That I'm strongly in favor of.
Yeah, but you don't even need to preserve that. I mean, you could specify that they'll have the right from the time of majority to sue whoever they want for what they did.
And you can make a statutory finding that it's medical malpractice to do it. But that part of the Tennessee law got upheld.
Mm-hmm. Okay, some more just popped in here. What happened here? Canuck. Okay, guys, totally missed that. Okay, wouldn't have done that. Fancy says, okay, this is Fancy says, giving authority to transitioning kids to white coats is not much better than to the state.
No, I'm for parents making that decision and for children to have clear, informed consent for the decision. I am for those limitations. I'm just not for either the white coats or the state being the final barometer.
Tampered sent a $5 tip. 1, is Viva able to host town halls in Florida at Rumble Studios or some larger venue, but in person for Cornell West, RFK Jr., and others who are censored or otherwise rejected by YouTube? Dude, that's a good idea. But I'm trying to get RFK. I'm gonna maybe just put out a tweet and says if this gets more than 5 likes, RFK has to do an interview. Bada bing, bada boom. That's a joke. Number 2, like Walmart, Best Buy had a special intranet access by salespeople, cashiers in stores with higher prices versus internet because of iPhones. They mea culpa'd after getting caught. The Shadow Knows, $10 tip, concerned less with the birthright citizenship and more with our food sector. It seems to be a threat to national security to allow megacorps and or individuals with ties to the CCP or any foreign country to own farmland or food processing plants or freight companies that it's a critical infrastructure.
Oh, I mean, that can be restricted because that's not speech. That's about foreign ownership of land, which is a very different animal.
Is there a remedy to this or the Constitution shield?
Oh, there's definitely a remedy to it. But the bigger concern right now is the federal government's about to go after FDA, USDA, and FSIS under the USDA. It's about to try to get rid of herd share agreements. So they're going to try to close down the remaining small independent farmers that are out there. So they're trying to corporatize the entire food supply.
And we got one last one. It's Rogue Thunder, $10 tip. All the good stuff I say is said for free, but I want you to know that I appreciate the two of you so very much. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to end, Robert, I'm going to end this with something. Hold on. This is very dangerous. Oh, come on, Punch. Oh, she's been good all night. Look at this dog. She's alive and well. We are going on a road trip tomorrow with the dogs. I'm going to pack up the studio and we're going to be in a nice spot for 5 days. Robert, the invite is an open invite if you can fly up to Canada, as unlikely as that might be. So I think we've done everything, Robert. This was amazing. Yeah, we're good here. This week I'll be live periodically. Wednesday night, I don't know that we have a sidebar. I'm going to have
not scheduled as of now.
Okay, so stay tuned. We'll announce the schedule as it comes up. Robert, what do you have to say for a final word to everybody who's still here?
Yeah, I'll set up the after party live chat here in a second that people can go into after this shuts down. But yeah, it was fun.
Another good one. All right, Robert, stick around.
last, I did forget. Dirty Harry. We watched that on Saturday. Was the analysis by the DA correct that that Eastwood's character, Harry Callahan, violated the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendment rights of the accused? The answer is probably. So, I mean, he basically kind of tortures him when he catches him to get information about the burial of a person who he thought to be alive. Turned out she was dead. The exigent circumstances might have just justified the entry and seizure, probably, or the entry and seizure of the person. It probably would not have justified the seizure of evidence. It probably wasn't in hot pursuit because there had been a delay between the time in which he interacted with him and when he found him later. So the exigent circumstance exception probably would have only been enough to enter and seize him as a person, not to seize evidence. There could have been an in plain sight argument, but that too would have been a little bit sketchy under the circumstances because they went back and looked for it and found it later. And because the defendant asked for his counsel, that's what could have created a plausible Sixth Amendment claim. Basically, Callahan's sacrifices the ability to arrest him for prior charges in an effort to save a life, which is probably the right moral decision to make. But constitutionally, the DA's analysis was probably correct. But the ending of the case is well deserved. It was a good shooting, as they would say. He gave him an opportunity. He asked him if he felt lucky, and he made a mistake. He wasn't lucky.
Robert, you told me how it ends. Now you have a spoiler alert. I've never seen Dirty Harry.
It's good to see both together because Dirty Harry focuses on it was when a time period when people associated civil rights with whiny criminal defendants that undermined the way the left damaged the anti-war movement by associating it with anti-Americanism. They damaged constitutional rights by associating it with the criminal class. But the second movie, both of these written by John Milius, father of Amanda Milius, who we've had on, who directed Plot Against the President and was recently on with Michael Malice. Is that his second movie, Magnum Force, portrays the bad guys as vigilante cops. So it balances out that Callahan's character is just trying to stand up against the chaos destroying a beautiful world, but do so in a manner that's morally consistent, neither celebrating the vengeance of institutional police, nor the sociopathic criminality of those who misuse the Constitution to cover their behavior. And the great quote in the second movie is a man's got to know his qualifications, his limitations.
We got one more $5 rant. It's the Shadow Knows $5. Would it be possible to charge endos and psychiatrists with manslaughter when their transgender patients commit suicide? If you can't take out the cartel, take out the pushers. Negligence. I don't think you get him for manslaughter. But hold on. Oh, you got number two. Number 2 is in the house. Booyah. He always goes straight for the face. Robert, amazing. Stick around. We'll say our proper goodbyes. Everyone in locals, thank you for being here. Thank you as always. See you throughout the week. Your the Bourbons with Barnes are going to be on as normal.
Yep.
Okay, excellent. So there will be no shortage of content for our above average community. I'm on the 2 things, by the way. The merch, DSLR Dave is working on a design inspired by the curve from our community, which says you are here. Fantastic. And interview, we're going to make it happen. Okay, everyone, enjoy the night. Peace out, peeps.